Chapter 2561. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. He would give her all of his money. Betrothal gifts were usually given by the groom to the bride. Usually, if the bride was having a hard time, she would keep some of it. Otherwise, she would return it all to the groom. To put it bluntly, it was Si Yi's betrothal gift. It was all his savings over the years, including real estate and his company. The betrothal gifts were given by the groom to the bride. Of course, they would not all fall into Qin Yu's hands but into Yun Jian's. If Yun Jian's family, Qin Yu's family, was having a hard time, Qin Yu's family would keep some of Si Yi's betrothal gifts. If Qin Yu's family was having a good time, Si Yi's betrothal gifts would be returned in full. The more betrothal gifts the groom gave, the more glamorous the bride's wedding would be. In a village, if the groom gave a betrothal gift of up to 1,000,000 yuan as a formality, he would be considered a very wealthy family. Shui Ying confessed on behalf of Si Yi. He would invite all the restaurants in the country to operate for 3 days for free, and it would only cost him 10 days of income. All of Si Yi's money would be given to Yun Jian in the form of betrothal gifts. He would not hold anything back. This process would be completed during the engagement banquet and the wedding. What? Hearing Shui Ying's words, Wang Xuanfang, whose butt was still firmly pressed against the bench, slipped and fell to the ground. Before she could get up, she exclaimed loudly with her eyes bulging. T, how much money is that? Young man, what do you do for a living? Let's not talk about country Z. Even in the whole world, there isn't a woman who's more glamorous than your granddaughter's wedding. Rong Jiaoxian, a primary school teacher, rolled her eyes and almost fainted from shock. Zhang Meihua's face stiffened as well. As the director of new crews, Yun Jian had already given Zhang Meihua a lot of face. Zhang Meihua already felt that at Yun Jian's level, she would not be able to find a man of Yun Jian's age who was more outstanding than her. She had thought that Si Yi's wealth could not compare to Yun Jian's, but Zhang Meihua was smart. She knew that she did not have a good relationship with Yun Jian, so she did not dare to say anything about Yun Jian's matters. Who would have thought that Si Yi's wealth had reached the pinnacle of perfection? Moreover, such a rich, powerful, handsome man was willing to give all of his wealth to Yun Jian? In this world, who else in the world could do that? Men were with the rich translation once, and Yun Jian and Yun Jian Zhang? What about Si Yi? He was willing to turn all of his wealth into a rare treasure called love. He would rather turn from the richest man in the world to a poor man with nothing in his pockets to give her that rare treasure called love. The group of old women present had lived for nearly a lifetime. They were used to seeing couples break up. After getting married, they were still on guard against each other. They were also used to seeing people cheat on each other. In the end, they would break up and even see each other as mortal enemies. However, they had never seen a young man like Si Yi. He did not say, "I love you" to Yun Jian in front of everyone from the beginning to the end, nor did he show excitement at the engagement banquet and wedding that outsiders could see even if they did not want to see it, unlike other young people. However, he was willing to give Yun Jian the wealth that others could not or could not afford. He did not even bat an eyelid. There was no lack of rich men in the world, but a man like Si Yi, who could give all of his wealth to Yun Jian when he already had it all, was a rare treasure in the world. He was using his actions to tell everyone present that he and Yun Jian were going to spend the rest of their lives together. A pair for the rest of their lives. Never to leave. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Chapter 2562. The engagement party was on the second day. It was already 11 p.m., and it was getting late. They still had to wake up early the next day. Yun Jian and Si Yi, as well as most of the guests of the engagement party, had gone to bed early. The stars filled the sky, as if signaling the end of the old era and the beginning of a new era. Huff, huff, huff. It was a different kind of night. Si Luo was holding a heart-shaped wooden stick used for blowing bubbles. She dipped the stick in the bubble solution and blew bubbles at the stars and moon in the sky. "It's so cold outside. What are you doing here?" Shuang walked out and saw Si Luo sitting alone outside, blowing bubbles with a wooden stick that he had made. He walked over and grabbed Si Luo's arm, wanting to bring him into the house. "I miss home. I want to go home." Si Luo, who was usually weak, used her other hand to push Shui Ying's hand away as she spoke expressionlessly. However, Her pouting lips made Shui Ying's heart skip a beat. Si Luo had never mentioned her home. Shui Ying had never asked about it either. Seeing Si Luo's upset expression, Shui Ying reached out to hold her hand. Then I'll bring you home. Not our home. It's my home. I want to go home. Sister Yunjian and the rest are so happy. I'm really happy for Sister Yunjian. But I want to go home. I want to go home where Daddy and Mommy are still around. But why is it so hard? Why was I so disobedient when I was young? If I knew that I would never see them again, I would definitely be obedient. I would definitely be very obedient. This time, Si Luo did not let go of Shui Ying's hand. She slowly squatted down and hugged her head. When he first met Si Luo, she was very innocent. However, her innocence was just to cover up the fear and dread in her heart. When I was 13, Daddy's business enemies came knocking on our door. They hired assassins to kill our entire family. I was stuffed under the bed by Mommy. I didn't dare to make a sound. I just watched as my family fell into a pool of blood. I was disobedient when I was young. When I was 6 or 7, life at home wasn't so good. Back then, Daddy and Mommy would wake up before 3 in the morning so that they could eat every day. They went out to sell newspapers and pick up trash. Life at home was too hard. I didn't know how to behave. My family's expenses were not enough to buy me a doll, so Daddy went out to sell blood and bought me a doll. I was so happy back then. After that, Daddy's business and business. I've always thought that Daddy and Mommy, Daddy and Mommy, Daddy and Mommy, Daddy and Mommy. At this point, Si Luo's body trembled violently. She paused for 2 seconds before continuing. When I saw Sister Yunjian and Mommy, Daddy 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 were so happy. But now, even looking at them and talking to them is a luxury. I really regret it. Si Luo's innocence was half an act. That was because she had to use her innocence to protect herself. Only now did Si Luo dare to open her heart to Shui Ying. When she was young, she didn't know how to behave. She thought that it was natural for her parents to treat her well. It was only after she lost them that she learned to cherish them. However, it was all too late. Shui Ying didn't say anything this time. He only reached out his long arms to pull Si Luo into his embrace when Si Luo buried his head in his sobs. In the future, it's my turn to protect you. My kindness to you is something you should accept. M. Chapter 2563. Shui Ying's last sentence brought tears to Si Luo's eyes. She had always felt guilty about it. Her parents' death was irreversible. But she regretted it. She regretted not being sensible when she was young. She regretted not being as obedient and sensible as she could have been when her parents were still alive. But life was like that. Once you missed it, even the richest person in the world would not be able to buy back the lost past. No one's kindness to you is something you should accept as a matter of course. Including her parents. That was why Si Luo had always been living in guilt. She hated herself for not being sensible and being disobedient when her parents were in their most difficult times. She blamed herself for not being able to repay them in time. But Shui Ying hugged her and said, "I'm good to you, so you should accept it." His kindness to her was something she should accept. She didn't need anything in return. Just like how her parents treated her. That sentence made Si Luo's eyes turn red. She could not hold back her tears anymore. She pretended to be naive in order to survive. Even though Si Luo pretended to be naive back then, she was only half sincere. That was why no one realized it. But now, she was truly touched by Shui Ying's words. She used to think of the world as her home. But after meeting him, it was as if she had returned to her parents' protection. It was so warm. She had to cherish and accompany you. She would scold your parents for wanting the best for you. Because when you look back, you might realize that your parents, who had always been protecting you, were no longer around. The engagement banquet was held as usual the next day. There was usually nothing special at an engagement banquet. Friends and family would be invited for a meal and a chat, and that would be it. On this day, the most important thing to mention was that in Country Z, the couplet, Ce and Yunjian, grow old together, appeared on every street and alley in the country. These words appeared on all the trucks on the road, on all the bus billboards in the city, and on all the restaurants in the country. This caused a sensation all over the world. Passers-by and residents all asked what was going on. A national celebration was probably nothing more than this. There was nothing worth mentioning at the engagement banquet. After midnight, the engagement banquet was officially over. Mu Ying did show up the next day, but she had a worried look on her face. Mad Dragon was nowhere to be seen beside Mu Ying. Yun Jian was a little confused when she saw him during the day. Yun Jian suddenly received a text message when the engagement party was just over in the wee hours of the morning. She glanced at the message and walked out. As she walked out, she glanced at Mu Ying and explained to Ce before she hurriedly left. South Africa. Moon City. At a scientific laboratory. After Mad Dragon agreed to the unreasonable request of the perverted doctor's son, the perverted doctor's son tied Mad Dragon to an operating table. The perverted doctor's son held a scalpel and rubbed it until it made a gotcha sound. Mad Dragon, let's make a deal. As long as you give me your heart for an experiment, I'll save your woman. I won't go back on my word. The perverted doctor's son looked at Mad Dragon with a sinister expression. As he said that, the scalpel was about to fall on Mad Dragon's heart. Just as the scalpel was about to pierce Mad Dragon's heart, with a bang, the door was kicked open. At the same time, a slender figure broke through the door and entered. At the same time, a butterfly knife stabbed into one of the perverted doctor's son's eyeballs at a speed that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. Tisk! The butterfly knife pierced the eyeball, causing it to detach from his glasses and burst on the spot. The perverted doctor's son took a few steps back and wailed in pain. Ah! 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 At that time, the beautiful figure who had just entered swept her gaze across the room, then stared at Mad Dragon. Suddenly, her lips curled up coldly, and she said something that frightened the perverted doctor's son so much that all the cells in his body trembled. Do you know how much money I spent to recruit him? How dare you lay a finger on one of my kosher mercenaries, slaying God's men? How dare you? Chapter 2564. Back then, Yun Jian had snatched Mad Dragon from Ce. After snatching Mad Dragon from Ce and forcing Mad Dragon to join the kosher mercenaries, Yun Jian had to pay Mad Dragon a fixed salary. Mad Dragon's status in the world was second only to Yun Jian, who was ranked first in the International Secret Service. Although there was a huge difference in the price of their missions, Mad Dragon was ranked second in the world of Secret Service. In spite of it, as God of War who ranked third on the International Secret Agent chart, if Mad Dragon were to perish, Wuxia mercenaries would be the one to suffer the heaviest loss. The psychopathic doctor's son who had his eyeball pierced by the butterfly knife Yun Jian tossed out wailed as he rolled on the floor, shuddering. When he heard what Yun Jian said, his other eye that was still intact widened like a fish's eye. He had forgotten. After Mad Dragon left an Hun organization, he had joined the kosher mercenaries. An Hun organization wouldn't pursue the death of an assassin or Secret Service agent, but the kosher mercenaries would. The kosher mercenaries were known internationally for being protective of their own. When he was messing with Mad Dragon, he had completely forgotten that Mad Dragon was now a member of the kosher mercenaries. Don't kill me. Don't kill me. He covered his blinded eye and rolled on the ground, trying to beg for mercy from Yun Jian. Seeing how terrified he was, Yun Jian smirked. She walked over and took out another butterfly knife. She cut open the ropes binding Mad Dragon. Before Yun Jian arrived, Mad Dragon had already been stabbed multiple times by the crazy doctor's son, but Mad Dragon didn't even make a sound. You touched my subordinate. Now that he's seriously injured, he won't be able to bring any benefits to the kosher mercenaries for the next few months. You know that the kosher mercenaries have always been protective of their own. Do you think I'll let you go? Yun Jian stepped forward, her white shoes making a sound as she walked. She walked in front of the crazy doctor's son and said expressionlessly, No, don't kill me. I'll do anything. I'll tell you anything. As long as you don't kill me. Unlike the crazy doctor's son, the crazy doctor's son was a coward who was afraid of death. At this moment, he was covering his bleeding eye. He didn't even care about the unbearable pain of having his eye pierced. Hand over the secret manual that your father taught you. Don't play any tricks. I have ways to kill you. Yun Jian saw that the time was right and said calmly. If Yun Jian was like Mad Dragon, asking for the secret manual or begging him for Mu Ying, then the crazy doctor's son would definitely think that he had something that others couldn't get. Therefore, he wouldn't be willing to hand it over for a long time. However, Yun Jian had pierced his eyeballs just now. There was no way he did not believe that Yun Jian dared not kill him. Like an obedient dog, the man covered his eye and crawled to the side of the laboratory. He took out a very old book from a hidden bookshelf at the back of the laboratory and hurriedly handed it to Yun Jian. Here. I gave it to you. You said you'd let me go. After stuffing the book into Yun Jian's hands, the crazy doctor's son crawled out. However, he wasn't even halfway out. Holding the secret manual the man gave her, she spun around abruptly and tossed the butterfly knife with her other hand that was swinging it lightly. With a swoosh, the butterfly knife pierced the man's heart from his back. You don't speak, believe, use. The crazy doctor's son turned his head around and shouted with all his might. However, before he could finish, Yun Jian was already in front of him. She reached out and pulled out the butterfly knife from the back of the crazy doctor's son. She wiped the blood on the knife with a tissue as if she hadn't done anything. With a red arc, the crazy doctor's son uttered the last words of terror that he would ever hear in his life. I, slaying God, have killed countless people. When have I ever kept my word? Chapter 2565. Page 1/1. As soon as Yun Jian uttered the last word, the psychopath's son's eyes widened and he fell to the ground. He did not even close his eyes as he stared at Yun Jian. If one were to look closely, they would notice that his lips twitched in panic after he heard Yun Jian's last word. His pronunciation was SS, the initials of slaying God. Cough. Why are you here? Mad Dragon had been stabbed several times. He turned to glance at Yun Jian and covered the blood that was flowing out of his wound. Mad Dragon was smart. He knew why Yun Jian wanted the psychopath's son to bring the secret manual that the psychopath had left behind. That perverted Ph.D. student had the habit of taking notes when he was alive, and all his knowledge and wealth were recorded in this secret book. This secret manual was the psychopath's diary when he was alive. With it, Yun Jian could concoct the medicine to save Mu Ying and maintain Mu Ying's life. Therefore, the psychopath's son's life and death were no longer important to Yun Jian and Mad Dragon. They walked out of the laboratory. Mad Dragon held the wounds on his body and suddenly stopped in his tracks. Can you promise me one thing? Mad Dragon coughed and asked. Tell me. Yun Jian had finished wiping the butterfly knife. Her eyes were fixed on it as she spoke calmly. Don't tell her that I was injured and that I asked for medicine for her. Don't tell her that I almost died. Mad Dragon pleaded. Yun Jian looked up and glanced at Mad Dragon for a second. The next second, she lowered her head expressionlessly and gave her silent consent. Work hard after you've recovered. The kosher mercenaries don't keep idle people. That was a promise. Mad Dragon raised a brow and nodded. Yun Jian returned to Hubble Island in the early morning of the next day. The engagement banquet was never going to be lively because it was reserved for the wedding ceremony. The wedding ceremony was as lively as it could be. Yun Jian and Si Yi's wedding date was set. It would be held on the 1st of April, which was Yun Jian's birthday. That was the day Yun Jian turned 20 years old and could go to the Civil Affairs Bureau with Si Yi to get their marriage certificate. Fortunately, there was still some time before the wedding ceremony. Jian, the guests have gone back. We should pack up and go back to Longmen City. Qin Yiru mentioned the engagement banquet to Yun Jian after it was over. Mom, you go back first. I'll take Xiao Jian on a trip this afternoon. The engagement banquet had just ended, but Si Yi addressed Qin Yiru as Mom naturally, sounding like he had practiced it thousands of times. After that, Si Yi kept a straight face as if he was afraid that the two troublesome children would tag along, but he added, It's just me and Xiao Jian going on a trip. Qin Yiru knew that Si Yi did not want to bring the two children with him at once. She smiled and nodded. Okay. I'll take Yuan and Mingyu. Have fun. In the end, Si Yi's plan did not work out. Si Yi had planned to leave Hubble Island with Yun Jian, but the little boy had noticed them somehow. As if knowing that Si Yi was going to leave him and his sister behind to take Yun Jian out, the little guy scurried over and mumbled, I'm not sure. Ayya, Daddy. Let's pee together. Peeing together meant that they were going together. Once the little boy came out, the girl noticed that Yun Jian and Si Yi were leaving too. Both of them cried and threw a tantrum, so Yun Jian brought them along. On the bus to Country D, Si Yi's chiseled features were dark throughout the journey. Both children sat on Yun Jian's lap and babbled excitedly. They met a middle-aged man from Country Z along the way. Like Yun Jian and Ce, he was also bringing his family to India for a vacation. Seeing both children sitting on Yun Jian's lap and Ce looking glum, the middle-aged man greeted Yun Jian and glanced at Ce before telling Yun Jian, "You're both taking care of your children. Is this the stepfather of the two children? It must be tough for you to take care of them alone. Young lady, it must be hard on you. I'm a parent too. I know how tough it is to take care of children." Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 2566. The middle-aged man didn't know about the relationship between Ce and Yun Jian. Earlier, he had greeted Yun Jian. Now he saw Ce sitting by the bus window, looking out of the window with an expression that said he didn't want to see the two children. Seeing that there was no expression on his cold face, the middle-aged man automatically assumed that Ce was unhappy with the two children's arrival. If he wasn't a stepfather, then what was he? The middle-aged man's name was Lu Zhengdong. He was already 38 years old. He was traveling with his wife and two children who weren't even 10 years old. It could be said that he doted on his children to the extreme. Lu Zhengdong was the biological father of his children, so he always felt that a child's biological parents would definitely be extremely good to their children. The feeling that Ce gave him made Lu Zhengdong think that Ce was the stepfather of the little boy and the little girl. That was why he said those words. Lu Zhengdong didn't mean to say those words. However, after he said those words, Ce's sharp black eyes glanced sideways at him. Seeing this, Lu Zhengdong was so frightened that his body trembled and he didn't say anything else. By the time he reacted, Ce had already grabbed the clothes on the back of the little boy's back with one hand and pulled him onto his lap. From the beginning to the end, Ce didn't say a word. They're a married couple. Why the hell are you talking about stepfather? You're the stepfather. Lu Zhengdong's wife was a very honest person based on her appearance. After hearing her husband's words, she reached out to grab Lu Zhengdong's ear and gently twisted it. Then she smiled at Yun Jian. "My husband is outspoken and speaks carelessly. Don't mind him, little girl. It's fine." Yun Jian replied. "Nonsense. Why are you still fooling around in the future? They're a loving couple." Lu Zhengdong's wife patted Lu Zhengdong and reprimanded him in her native dialect. Lu Zhengdong scratched his head and really didn't say anything. Halfway through the bus ride, Lu Zhengdong's wife started chatting with Yun Jian out of boredom. Lu Zhengdong's wife was called Chen Min. She was a very honest person. She had two children, a boy and a girl. Therefore, when he saw that Yun Jian was young and had two children, one boy and one girl, he became interested and talked to Yun Jian more. Yun Jian and Ce's destination was the Golden Temple in D country. The Golden Temple was a must-visit for tourists to D country. The golden roof of the Golden Temple was built with 880 kilograms of gold. Its scale was very majestic. Upon hearing that Yun Jian and Ce were also going to the Golden Temple, Chen Min hugged her 7-year-old daughter and said excitedly, "My family is also going there to play." It went smoothly. What a coincidence. In contrast to Chen Min's excitement, Yun Jian merely blinked her eyes. When they arrived at their destination, Yun Jian parted ways with Chen Min's family. D country wasn't rich and the status of women in D country was very low. Yun Jian and Ce found a hotel to stay in. The Golden Temple was a world-famous tourist attraction, so very few people came to visit it. The hotel that Yun Jian and Ce found was one of the bigger hotels. When they entered the hotel, they met a group of tourists from Z country. There were also other groups from all over the world. After Yun Jian and Ce checked in, the group of tourists from Z country saw Yun Jian and Ce. One of the people in charge of the tour walked over and said to Yun Jian and Ce, "Hello, everyone. Haha, I'm the person in charge of the tour group. Everyone calls me Golden Gold. It's like this. D country has very few toilets and the status of women is low. I see that there are 2 women in your family. It's a little dangerous to travel here alone. Are you interested in joining our tour group?" Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2567. Our tour group specializes in tourism activities and has even hired a few bodyguards to protect everyone's safety. After all, who doesn't want to return to their homeland safely and happily? How about it? Do you want to join us? The person in charge of the tour group, who called himself Jean, took out a pack of cigarettes from his pocket and handed one to CE while introducing the benefits. Needless to say, Jin was the person in charge of the tour group. When he saw Yun Jian and CE with the two children, he saw Yun Jian and CE as glowing silver. Hence, he hurried over and tried to pull Yun Jian and CE into the group. Unexpectedly, Yun Jian and CE ignored Jin and walked around him into the hotel room. Seeing this, Jin snorted and turned around. "Hey, brother, did you fail to get a guest? Haha, she doesn't even care about you. But that girl is really beautiful. That waist, if I can ride her a few times, I'll laugh out loud in my dreams." Jin turned around and saw a man who was slightly taller than Jin. However, his facial features were uglier than Jin's. "I don't like that guy." Jin glanced in the direction that CE had left. He put the cigarette that he wanted to pass to CE in his mouth, lit it, took a puff and blew out the smoke. "Why? Do you want to do him? Brother, I'll follow you." The perverted man in front of Jin said. "TSK." Jin glanced at the perverted man and didn't reply. The original plan was to visit the Golden Temple the next day, so Yun Jian went to bed early. At 3 in the morning, the little girl woke up because she wanted to pee. She cried and said the word shoo. The little girl needed someone to look after her, so CE stayed behind while Yun Jian carried the little girl out. She also wanted to go to the toilet. Germany was a country that was extremely short of toilets. Women here could only go to the toilet twice a day, and they had to go to the toilet in pairs. After asking around, the news he got was that the toilet was 5 kilometers away from the hotel. The little girl was fine after she finished peeing outside the door. After sending the little girl back to the hotel, Yun Jian walked out by himself. She planned to go to the toilet 5 kilometers away. Country D was such a country. There was an extreme lack of toilets. In Country D, the chances of women being raped when they went to the toilet in the middle of the night were quite high. Just as Yun Jian walked out, she bumped into Chen Min who was on the bus. "Hey, are you going to the toilet too? I heard that the toilet is 5 kilometers away. It's not safe for us to go there alone. So, I decided to go with everyone." Chen Min greeted Yun Jian. Beside Chen Min were a few Z Country women who were traveling with the Z Country tour group. Since they were on the same path, Yun Jian didn't refuse. When the group of people arrived at the toilet 5 kilometers away, they all rushed there. "Oh my God! Even the toilet is 5 kilometers away in this godforsaken place. Luckily, I don't live in this godforsaken place. Otherwise, I would go crazy," one of the women said. Then, everyone started chatting. In the dark, Jin and the perverted man, who had followed them all the way here, accidentally discovered that Yun Jian had come out alone. So in order to vent their anger during the day, the two of them planned to lay their hands on Yun Jian. "I've attracted the group of old bachelors in town here. These women will probably lose their virginity. When the time comes, we'll cover our faces and no one will recognize us. We'll *CK all the women. We'll also save money on finding a prostitute. How awesome!" The perverted man said in a perverted voice. "Shoo, lower your voice. She's coming out." Jin suddenly covered the perverted man's mouth. They saw Yun Jian walking out of the toilet. The rest of the women also left the toilet. At the moment when everyone was ready to go back together, Yun Jian, who had walked out of the toilet as if nothing had happened, suddenly raised her eyes. The pair of eyes under her bangs seemed to be stained with strange red streaks under the moonlight. Then, in front of all the women present, as well as Jin and the perverted man who were hiding in the dark, she immediately opened her mouth and said something that made everyone panic. "You've been following us all the way. Are you still not planning to come out?" Chapter 2568. 5 kilometers away from the hotel, there was a toilet. This toilet was piled up with stones and looked dilapidated. Although the people outside could not see the people inside the toilet was so dilapidated that it looked like it would fall down with a push. Yun Jian was standing 10 meters away from the toilet. Under the moonlight that was about to set in the west, her straight and slender figure was enough to arouse men's desire. But at this time, she stood in the same spot as if nothing had happened and suddenly said this sentence out of nowhere. As soon as she finished speaking, Jin and the perverted man who were hiding in the dark, as well as Chen Min, as well as the group of women who had come with the group to use the restroom, were all stunned. What do you mean by following us all the way? Don't scare me. It's so dark here. There's no one around. One of the women tugged at her clothes, and her face turned pale. She looked around and was clearly frightened to the point that she let out a cry. The other women who came with her trembled when they heard Yun Jian's words. Among the group of people who came here, 3 or 2 were men. And the whole group was from Z country. Although it was 3 o'clock in the morning, the people from Z country had long heard that there were few toilets in D country. Moreover, the chances of women going to the toilet alone were very high. Therefore, these women gathered a lot of people in the middle of the night and went to the toilet 5 kilometers away. A few of the women even dragged their boyfriends or husbands with them. They were the 3 or 2 men who were standing at the scene. 3 minutes after Yun Jian spoke, a woman whose husband was standing beside her was holding her man's arm. Seeing no one around them for a long time, she was not afraid of trouble and replied to Yun Jian in a loud voice. What's the matter? There's no one. Who are you trying to scare? Can you please shut your mouth? Otherwise, you can go back alone. This woman relied on her husband's protection and was not afraid that there were people around. That's right, that's right. There's no sound around. You shouldn't scare us like this just because you're young. We're old and can't stand being scared. Another woman chimed in. As soon as the woman holding her husband's arm finished speaking, the rest of the women also agreed and stood on the side of the woman holding her husband's arm. Exactly. Who are you trying to scare? In a dark environment, people would more or less be surrounded by a sense of ambience. At this moment, the surroundings were gloomy. Only the round moon hanging in the sky that was about to set in the west could vaguely illuminate the earth. They were surrounded by trees. In such a place, it was inevitable that she would be a little scared. In addition, the crime rate in Germany was relatively high overall. Therefore, after confirming that Yun Jian was deliberately creating a scary atmosphere, everyone present turned their attention to Yun Jian. In the dark, Jin and the wretched man were first stunned when they were discovered. Then, they turned around quietly and wanted to escape. They had originally planned to take advantage of the situation when the group of old bachelors from D country appeared and all the women present were subdued. But they had been discovered. What kind of hearing did that woman have? Jin and the wretched man quietly turned around and prepared to leave. However, just as she and the wretched man were about to leave, all the women began to accuse Yun Jian. So, Yun Jian, who was standing on the spot, raised her hands slightly, and 3 knives were caught in the gap between her fingers. She didn't even look at them and threw the knife in her hand into the dark. No one saw that in the night, 3 knives were nailed to the thick tree trunk in front of Jin and the wretched man, who were about to escape. It was night, and Jin and the wretched man already felt guilty for doing something bad. At this moment, they suddenly saw 3 knives flying past them and stabbing into the tree trunk. The knives that suddenly appeared were like ghosts. Under everyone's gaze, the 2 of them were so scared that they screamed and rolled to where Yun Jian and the others were. As they crawled and rolled, they shouted, F***CK, ghost, ghost, ghost. What the hell? Ghost. M. Chapter 2569. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. 2 silhouettes suddenly sprung out from the dark forest, causing everyone who accused Yun Jian of scaring them to shudder. There's really someone. The woman holding her husband's arm was so scared that her face turned pale. She couldn't help but turn to look at Yun Jian. How did she know that someone was following them? Tour Guide Jean. Tour Guide Meng? Why are you here? Just when everyone was panicking at the sight of Jin and the wretched man rushing out from the dark, someone recognized them and asked in surprise. Cough. We saw that it was not safe for you to come out alone, so we followed you and planned to protect you from behind. I was planning to secretly escort you back. Jin reacted quickly. He quickly made up a story and spoke as if it was true. Then, Jin pushed the perverted man, who was Tour Guide Meng. Cough. Cough, cough, cough. Yes. Tour Guide Meng quickly said after being pushed by Jin. Tour Guide Jean, Tour Guide Meng, you're so professional. Thank goodness I chose your tour group. The woman holding her husband's arm was grateful after hearing Jin and Tour Guide Meng's words. Everyone else also looked at Jean Jean and tour guide Meng with gratitude. Yun Jian only glanced at Jean Jean and the perverted man and didn't say a word. The next moment, her ears twitched and she said expressionlessly, "Someone's here, let's go immediately." Then, she didn't care if the people around her followed and left first. With the previous lesson in mind, the rest of the group quickly followed after Yun Jian. A minute later, a group of old bachelors from Country D arrived and realized that there was no one there. F***CK. Those two tour guides from Country Z dared to lie to us. We'll get him tomorrow. One of the old bachelors of Country D stomped his feet and spoke in Country D's language. Everyone quickly returned to the hotel. The next morning, Yun Jian carried the little girl. Ce carried the little girl and walked downstairs. Early in the morning, they prepared to leave for Country D's scenic spot, the Golden Temple. Just as they went downstairs, they met the tour group. There was also Chen Min's family. Chen Min greeted Yun Jian. Yun Jian just nodded slightly. As soon as they walked out of the hotel, the little guy clenched his fists and made a few sound. Yun Jian naturally figured out the attributes of the little fellow and the little girl. Without exception, the little fellow's voice indicated that the little fellow had peed. Children don't know any better, so they pee directly on the diapers. Yun Jian asked Ce to put the baby down on a clean step at the entrance of the hotel. She reached out to change the baby's diaper. "Let me do it." Ce gently grabbed her wrist and personally changed the baby's diaper. He. The little guy was completely unaware that he had wet his own diaper. His hands and feet were like a turtle when it was turned over, climbing up and down left and right. He was so cute that people couldn't help but want to kiss his forehead. At this moment, Chen Min's family also walked out of the hotel. Seeing the little fellow's face, Chen Min couldn't help but say to Yun Jian, "Your son is so handsome. He'll definitely be a handsome guy in the future." After hearing this, Yun Jian politely thanked her. At this moment, Ce had already rudely removed the baby's diaper. He took a new one and skillfully changed the baby's diaper. However, just as he was about to change the baby's diaper, the little fellow made another sound. A stream of urine sprayed onto Ce's face like a fountain. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 2570. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Naughty Ce. Tian Tai Hahu. Page 1/1. Ce moved to the side the moment the little guy spat out the urine. His speed was too fast for anyone to react to. However, the little guy's speed was too fast and Ce's shirt was stained with the little guy's pee. Ce's face darkened. "Go back and change. I'll do it for him." Yun Jian choked back the laughter she was about to burst out laughing at the sight of him. She walked over and placed the little girl on the steps. She quickly changed the little guy's diaper. Needless to say, the little guy was amazing. This was not the first time he had to pee while changing a diaper. However, every time he did it, he would not spill it on himself. Don't laugh, this was a profound skill that required a good grasp of strength. Ce's face darkened as she turned and walked back into the hotel. Chen Min came over and whispered to Yun Jian. "Hey! My husband said that your husband was like the child's stepfather. Just now I saw his eyes. It was as if he really wanted to strangle the child. It was as if he had a deep hatred for the child." After that, Chen Min winked at Yun Jian. Yun Jian's lips curved into a smile. The Golden Temple was located not far from the hotel. The roof of the Golden Temple was made of pure gold and its value could not be measured by money. Of course, if someone wanted to steal from the Golden Temple, it was obviously illogical. After all, this place was heavily guarded, and the gold had been built inside the Golden Temple, creating a huge temple. Unless someone was able to move the temple. Yeah. Gold. Gold. The little girl clapped her hands excitedly when she saw the Golden Temple made of shining gold. At this moment, tour guides Jean Jean and Meng were sitting not far away. Both of them were wearing masks. That was because early in the morning, the old bachelor who had failed to get his way yesterday had caught them and beaten them up. Jean Jean and Meng Jean clenched their fists. Their anger towards Yun Jian and Ce increased by another level. "Brother, I can't take this lying down," tour guide Meng said. "I can't take this lying down either," Jean Jean replied. Suddenly, the two of them, who were originally looking at Yunjian and Siyi's family of 4, looked at each other and formed a conspiracy. To reach the Golden Temple, one had to climb the nameless mountain near the Golden Temple. Usually, people who came here to play would be recommended by the hotel to visit the Golden Temple first before going to Nameless Mountain. Of course, most people would visit the Golden Temple on the first day and Nameless Mountain on the second. On the way back, Chen Min made an appointment with Yunjian to go to Nameless Mountain with Yunjian the next day. Yunjian agreed. At 2 o'clock in the morning, Yunjian finally coaxed the little fellow and the little girl to sleep. Ce went into the bathroom to take a bath. The two of them made a lot of noise and didn't fall asleep until midnight. Seeing that the night was beautiful, Yunjian brought the telescope that the two of them insisted on buying when they were shopping at the Golden Temple and went up to the rooftop, the highest floor of the hotel. The highest floor of the hotel was the 6th floor, the highest floor in the vicinity. Looking down from here, they could see the entire scene, but the rooftop of the hotel could not be seen from other floors. The night was dark. Yunjian held the telescope with one hand and looked at the stars and moon in the sky. Bang, gotcha! Suddenly, the rooftop door at the back was opened, closed, and locked. Yunjian squinted. Just as she was about to turn around to find out what was going on, a familiar chest came into her embrace. Xiao Jian, it's been a long time since we last met. The moment the rich voice rang, Yunjian could even feel a certain part of Siyi's desire swelling and pushing against her. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 2571. Yunjian hadn't come to the rooftop to let Ce do this. Even if the rooftop of this hotel was on the 6th floor, it was pitch black, and the moon wasn't very bright. Dark clouds had covered the sky, so there wasn't a single bit of light in the surroundings. She wouldn't cooperate with him here. Let's go back. The children are still here. Yunjian was about to say this when she suddenly felt Ce gently bite her most sensitive ear. In that instant, Yunjian felt her entire body go numb. However, Ce seemed determined to have her this time. He grabbed Yunjian's wrist with one hand and reached his other hand into the corner of her shirt. Under Yunjian's loose clothes, he grabbed her tender spot. Yunjian couldn't help but let out a soft moan. She hurriedly covered her mouth and leaned against Ce's shoulder. With her height, she only reached Ce's chin. She tiptoed so that her chin could reach his shoulder. When Ce heard Yunjian's soft moan, his eyes turned scarlet. In the next moment, he carried Yunjian horizontally and walked to the rooftop warehouse door. He kicked open the door and carried Yunjian inside. The night was still very long. Unknowingly, the dark clouds in the sky gradually dispersed, revealing the full moon and countless stars. The twinkling stars flickered. Two of them gradually approached each other and eventually overlapped with each other. It was just like someone in the rooftop warehouse. The next day, Yunjian woke up at around 10 in the afternoon. At this time, Chen Min's family should have been waiting for quite some time. However, Chen Min's family was very friendly. They didn't blame Yunjian for oversleeping and even asked Yunjian if she was too tired from playing with the two children yesterday. Actually, taking care of the two children wasn't tiring for Yunjian at all. She was the one who was tired. I'm fine, Yunjian replied indifferently. Chen Min also had a husband. Seeing Yunjian like this, she just smiled. There were many people climbing the Nameless Mountain. Other than the Golden Temple, the Nameless Mountain was a must-visit attraction. Because this place was very beautiful, all the stones, flowers and trees were all natural, and the air here was very fresh. Yunjian and the others quickly climbed to the top of the mountain. What made Yunjian feel strange was that she had been in the circle of assassins and secret agents for so many years. Except for the beginning, she had never felt sore in her legs. But today, when she carried the little girl up the mountain, her beautiful legs actually trembled involuntarily. Because of the little fellow and the little girl, Ce hadn't tasted anything fresh for a long time. Yesterday, he had done it with her 8 times in one go. Yunjian even suspected that Ce had 8 kidneys. We're almost at the suspension bridge. Nameless Mountain is most famous for its suspension bridge. This suspension bridge was suspended from the cliff of the two mountains. The bridge was 600 meters above the ground. Because it was very sturdy, everyone wanted to walk on it. It was exciting and thrilling. Let's go too. Just thinking about it makes me excited. If someone stands on it and the suspension bridge collapses, they will fall from 600 meters. Chen Min excitedly led Yun Jian and the others to the suspension bridge that was suspended from the cliff of the two mountains. The suspension bridge was 100 meters long. Chen Min quickly led Yun Jian's family of 4 to the suspension bridge. Just as they walked onto the swaying suspension bridge, the suspension bridge swayed left and right. Chen Min panicked. "Oh my God! Don't tell me we're going to fall." Chen Min looked down at the 600 meters below them and her face turned pale. Of course not. The surrounding area is well protected. So many people have walked on this suspension bridge and nothing happened. How can we be the only ones in trouble? A stranger laughed and said. At this moment, Yun Jian and the others walked to the center of the suspension bridge. Because below them was an empty 600 meters in the air, everyone was a little frightened. However, just as the man finished speaking, the chain on the side of the drawbridge suddenly loosened a little. Everyone panicked and didn't dare to move. In the next second, the chain suddenly loosened without warning. Ah! The chain on the left side of the suspension bridge broke. At this moment, someone's frightened voice rang out. Hearing that, everyone who was still standing on the suspension bridge turned pale with fright. If the suspension bridge collapsed, it would be equivalent to them falling off a 600-meter-high cliff. They would definitely die. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. The sound of the chain gradually breaking was like a nightmare that lingered in everyone's ears. It's over. It's over this time. I don't want to die. The people standing on the suspension bridge were so frightened that they didn't dare to move. They were afraid that if they moved, the sound of the chain breaking would become even faster. The workers by the cliff were already thinking of a solution. However, just as the chain was about to break completely and everyone thought that the people standing on the suspension bridge would be thrown off the cliff. Chapter 2572. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. The suspension bridge was 100 meters long. Huge thick chains and some special materials were used to hang the bridge from the edge of the cliff between the two mountains. The bridge was firmly suspended in the air between the two mountains, which was 600 meters above the ground without any defensive measures. There were a few small suspension bridges that were suspended above the water, and the suspension bridges were only half a meter above the water. Even if there was a lake flowing violently below, there was a suspension bridge on both sides of the lake. Ordinary people who walked across the suspension bridge would be scared to death. Because there were at least dozens of people standing on the suspension bridge, some people would hold the railing and violently step on it in order to increase the excitement. At this time, even if they imagined themselves falling into the lake, they would panic and tremble. Not to mention that Yun Jian and the rest were standing on a suspension bridge that was 600 meters above the ground. If they fell, it would be a dead end. Furthermore, the suspension bridge's defensive measures were usually very sturdy and should be 100% safe. But the chains suddenly broke. This was something that no one could imagine. When the suspension bridge broke, there were at least 100 people on the suspension bridge. With so many people, even if the workers at the side pulled on the chains, they would not have the strength to hold on until the people at the foot of the mountain came to rescue them. In this kind of situation, it was usually certain death. Just when everyone thought that they were scared out of their wits, Yun Jian suddenly flipped over and stepped on the thin railings of the suspension bridge. Like a circus performer walking on a tightrope, she walked on the railings that were used as handrails when people walked on the suspension bridge. Not only did she not fall, moreover, she was sprinting towards the side of the cliff where the suspension bridge had broken the iron chain. The suspension bridge was full of people and walking on the railings was the fastest way to reach the cliff. But other than Yun Jian, most people would not even be able to stand on the railings. Even the circus performer who walked on a tightrope would not be able to do this in this kind of situation. Quickly look. That young lady. She actually. The workers at the side suddenly saw Yun Jian stepping on the railings of the suspension bridge and running towards them at a speed that could not be seen by the naked eye. They were so shocked that they shouted out loud. Heavens! What was she trying to do? We're going to fall. We're really going to fall. Who the hell is this woman? Mommy, save me. The tourists, who were hugging the railing of the suspension bridge tightly, did not dare to move. When they saw what Yun Jian did, their faces turned pale with fright. Stop her. The chains were unstable to begin with. She was running on the railing of the drawbridge again, and we could hardly hold on to the chain. Hurry up! Stop her! Fortunately, the iron chain slowly loosened. Just now when the staff reacted, they had already hugged the iron chain tightly. The rest of the people who didn't get on the suspension bridge and were compassionate also ran up to help the workers pull the chains. However, there were nearly 100 people on the suspension bridge. Their strength was not enough to pull on the chains, and they would not be able to hold on for long. Especially now that Yun Jian was running on the railing of the suspension bridge, it was simply putting pressure on them. Quick! Stop her! We can't hold on any longer. Is the engineer who can repair the chains on the mountain? A staff member pulled on the completely broken chain with everyone else. He used all his strength, and even the veins on his neck were protruding. He used all his strength to yell in a hoarse voice. Everyone who was holding on to the broken end of the chain used all their strength. Not everyone in the world was evil. This group of people who reached out to help had no relationship with the people trapped on the suspension bridge, but they reached out to help and held on to the chains tightly. Their feet were slowly inching towards the edge of the cliff. They could let go, and then they would be safe, but they were still trying their best. They could not hold on any longer. Just when everyone thought that the people on the suspension bridge would be thrown off the cliff like a kite with a broken string, Yun Jian had already landed on the flat ground with ease. She quickly walked to the broken chain, and without saying anything, she took the tool that she had prepared to use again. She used the tool to rub the broken part of the chain, and in a few moves, the broken part of the chain was perfectly repaired. She successfully completed this series of steps in less than a minute. At this moment, the workers who were holding on tightly to the chains and waiting for the engineer to come up and fix the chains, as well as the tourists, including the people on the suspension bridge who were criticizing Yun Jian for putting pressure on them, were all stunned. Their eyes widened. 3 minutes later, the staff from just now took the lead and exclaimed at Yun Jian when they realized what was going on. Are you the top engineer in the world? Normal engineers would not be able to repair the suspension bridge so quickly. We hired the top engineers in the world to maintain and build the suspension bridge. Around us, only Mr. Kenani has the ability to fix the current problem. May I know your name? Translator, Tim. Editor, Tim. Chapter 2573. There were so many people at the scene just now, and there were also repair tools at the scene. However, the staff and the tourists were desperately holding on to the iron chain. No one tried to fix it because no one knew how to fix it. Actually, it wasn't that there weren't any engineers at the scene, but this engineer didn't know how to fix such a difficult thing. This engineer only checked the safety factor of the suspension bridge every day. Don't be fooled by the dangerous games in the amusement park, as well as the suspension bridge, where one mistake could lead to heavy losses. It required the relevant personnel to be stationed all year round to check the danger factor every day. After this staff member took the lead to call out to Yun Jian, the surrounding people were all stunned. The people on the suspension bridge were scared silly. Everyone immediately left the suspension bridge. The women were all wiping their tears. It was obvious that they were really frightened. As for the men who didn't want to cry because of their pride, they were so scared that their legs were trembling. Scared me to death. I don't dare to come to this kind of place anymore. Chen Min hugged her child tightly. She was so scared that her face turned pale. Even at the most frightening moment just now, Chen Min's first reaction was to hug her child tightly. Just now, the situation was urgent. When they went up the mountain, Ce was carrying the two children because he was afraid that Yun Jian would be tired. That was why Yun Jian was able to rush to the cliff to save the situation. At that time, Ce didn't have the slightest bit of modesty. The little girl and the little guy were laughing and playing with each other in Ce's arms. They didn't feel the slightest bit of danger. After recovering from her shock, Chen Min walked to Yun Jian. She saw that Yun Jian's family of 4 didn't seem frightened at all. She swallowed hard and said to Yun Jian, You weren't scared just now? You actually did something so dangerous. What if you fell? Chen Min had just finished speaking when Yun Jian interrupted her. In my world, there are no accidents. In her world, there was only success. There were no accidents. Chen Min swallowed her saliva and didn't say anything else. The accident happened too suddenly, but thank you very much. On behalf of all the staff and all the tourists who almost died on the suspension bridge, I would like to apologize to you for doubting your ability. Thank you, young lady. After a false alarm, The staff member walked up to Yun Jian and bowed to her sincerely. The staff member thought that Yun Jian would say, "You're welcome," but Yun Jian sneered and said to him in a sarcastic tone, "Do you really think that the breaking of the chain was an accident?" The staff member was stunned. "What do you mean?" "Investigate who sent the staff away to touch the chains yesterday and today. You will definitely know what is going on." Yun Jian glanced at the staff coldly. Just now, her child was also on the suspension bridge. This accident that almost happened was completely caused by the negligence of the staff. This was not something that could be forgiven with just a word of thanks and an apology. "It's him. It must be those two. Now that I think about it, they made excuses to send us away this morning. It must be them." One of the staff members also heard Yun Jian's words. The staff member frowned and suddenly pointed at Jin and tour guide Meng, who were standing not far away. Everyone was shocked. Jin and tour guide Meng saw this and didn't say anything to refute. They were so scared that they turned around and ran away. "Stop them. Quick." The crowd panicked. But just as Jin and tour guide Meng were about to walk down the mountain, everyone saw a small figure swish in front of Jin and tour guide Meng. She raised her leg high and kicked Jin and tour guide Meng to the ground. Several staff members quickly rushed over. Yun Jian kicked Jin and tour guide Meng in front of several staff members and said coldly, "Send these two guys to the international prison. Tell them the code word. If they become gods by killing, they will never be able to get out of prison in this lifetime." Chapter 2574. Page 1/1. Killing to become a god was a code word. The international prison was a place to imprison international criminals. It was said that once you enter the international prison, you could forget about coming out alive. Those who were sent to the international prison either had their arms or legs broken. Their lives there were more painful than death. And Yun Jian had some friendship with the boss of the international prison. In other words, Jin and tour guide Meng's actions had seriously endangered the lives of many people. Yun Jian, on the other hand, told the staff to throw Jin and tour guide Meng into the international prison. This was no different from killing Jin and tour guide Meng. This staff member was almost killed by Jin and tour guide Meng. If the suspension bridge broke, everyone would be buried here. Jin and tour guide Meng would not leave any traces, and the staff would be the ones to suffer. Perhaps because of Jin and tour guide Meng, these staff members would be ruined for the rest of their lives. One had to know that since the suspension bridge was built, it meant that the suspension bridge was definitely not dangerous. Of course, unless it was man-made. The staff member was disgusted with Jin and tour guide Meng after finding out about their behavior. Hearing Yun Jian's words, the staff member hurriedly responded, "Good. I will make sure that they are severely punished." At this time, the tourists who had just escaped from the suspension bridge heard about this. They stood up one by one and personally escorted Jin and tour guide Meng away. The group of tourists who had been brought to D country by Jin and tour guide Meng all exclaimed, "Those two evil people. To think that I thought they were good people. I didn't expect them to almost harm us. This kind of scum deserves to die." As it turned out, Jin and tour guide Meng were done for. After staying in country D for 3 days, Yun Jian and Ce did not stay for long, returning to Longmen City in a low-key manner by car. After Yun Jian and Ce returned to Longmen City, the next day, the news reported that 2 tour guides of a certain tour group had lost their humanity and hundreds of innocent people had died at Country D's nameless mountain. In the end, perhaps even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore. On the way to the international prison, the truck carrying them suddenly flipped over and went down the mountain. Jin and tour guide Meng were killed on the spot. On the other hand, the driver of the truck was completely unscathed. There was no sign of injury at all. When Yun Jian saw the news, she closed her eyes and turned to look at Ce, who was staring at her intently. Needless to say, this matter was definitely done by him. Of course, Yun Jian didn't ask too much. She packed her luggage and planned to go back to school in Jiangqing City. After a while, she would set off for Yun Province's Hidden Dragon Mountain. On the Hidden Dragon Mountain, there was a third artifact that was enough to kill the mysterious man. She had never forgotten. But before that, she had to go back to Jiangqing City to study for a period of time. It had been a long time since he went back. When Ce saw that she was halfway through packing, he stretched out his slender fingers and massaged his temples. Xiao Jian, if there's something I'm hiding from you, will you blame me? He asked abruptly. His words made Yun Jian's hand pause in the middle of packing. It's okay if you blame me. You're mine when you're alive and you're mine when you're dead. Ce moved his lips and passed a document to Yun Jian in the next second. Yun Jian merely glanced at the document nonchalantly. Her pupils contracted in the next second. Yun Jian, who had always been calm, looked shocked. On the document that made Yun Jian's expression change, it was written as follows. Top reading website, M. Chapter 2575. There weren't many things in the world that could make Yun Jian reveal such an expression. However, what was written in the information was beyond Yun Jian's imagination. Is this true? Yun Jian pursed her red lips. Her shocked and incredulous expression was replaced by an unconcealable joy. I've been hiding it from you because of Han's rules. They don't allow the assassins and agents in the organization to have any attachments. Your brother is an exception. Ce nodded. He had been hiding this from her for a long time. At first, it was because he had lost his memory of being a senior immortal and didn't recognize Yun Jian. Therefore, he only treated her as an agent of Han. Later, he couldn't bring himself to say it. He was afraid that the loving relationship he had built with great difficulty would be ruined by this incident. Finally, he mustered up the courage to speak. As the leader of Han, Ce killed people without batting an eyelid. He never did things sloppily. However, when it came to her, whenever it concerned her, even if he had done something bad to her, he would hesitate for a long time, mustering up the courage to speak. These words didn't exist in Ce's mind before he met Yun Jian. Ce was already prepared for Yun Jian to be angry with him after she read the information he gave her. However, Yun Jian's hand that was holding the information trembled violently. In the next moment, she suddenly threw the information on the floor and rushed up to him. She hugged Ce. Then, she used her actions to tell Ce that after she found out about this incident, it didn't matter if she was angry or not. Instead, she became even more proactive. That night, Ce enjoyed Yun Jian's unprecedented actions. For Yun Jian to be so proactive after she found out, Ce must have taken out this information when he had just confirmed his relationship with Yun Jian. Then, wouldn't he be able to eat meat earlier? He might even have formed a football team. He Province, Suzhou. As a province in the central region, He Province wasn't prosperous, but it didn't retire either. In Suzhou of He Province, the class differentiation was very obvious. In the city, the rich were filthy rich, while the poor were so poor that they had to beg. In this era, the country had yet to give all homeless people a place to stay. Now, there were no longer any homeless people who begged on the streets. They didn't even have a place to sleep at night, so they had to sleep in the gutters. That was because the country was paying for these poor homeless people. Everyone could eat their fill and eat well. At this point, he had to mention that it was good for the country to be strong. In this era, there were still many homeless people on the streets. Longmen City had always been a place where men plowed and women weaved, so there were basically no beggars in Longmen City. He Province's Suzhou was different. The economic conditions here were more backward than Longmen City. Many people could still be seen huddled up in public places such as the train station. In a slum in Suzhou, it was a 19-year-old girl with a black hat on her head. She was dressed in simple clothes, but they couldn't hide her perfect figure. She shuttled through the slums and soon arrived at a dirty place. Matching the address written on the slip of paper in her hand, Yun Jian walked into a slum. Coming to the second floor of the slum, Yun Jian saw the door open just as she reached the staircase. In a dilapidated room, a poor woman dressed in sackcloth was bending over to cook a simple meal in a pot made of firewood. You guessed it right. Her parents in her past life weren't dead. It was Ce back then who got someone to hide this matter, so she couldn't find out about it no matter how hard she tried. After Zhou Ran left, the old lady looked up and wanted to ask Yun Jian who she was looking for. But when the old lady looked up, Yun Jian was already gone. West Gate Market. Because Zhou Ran ran too fast, she almost fell down. Her hands were quick, and she supported herself on the ground to stand up. Her knees were heavily rubbed against the ground, but she didn't care about the pain in her knees and rushed to the West Gate Market. "What did you say?" "Say it again." "My sister will come back. And my little brother will come back too. Don't talk about my mom like that. My mom isn't a jinx." At the entrance of the market, a girl who was 1.7 meters tall and had short hair clenched her fists and scolded back while fighting with 4 or 5 boys. At first, the girl had the upper hand, but later on, 4 or 5 boys worked together to suppress the girl. This girl was also Zhou Ran's daughter. Her name was Yun Mu, and she was Yun Jian's biological sister in her previous life. She was only 2 years younger than Yun Jian's body in her previous life, which meant that she was only 1 year younger than Yun Jian's current body. She was 18 years old. When Yun Jian was kidnapped, Zhou Ran's mother-in-law forced Zhou Ran to have another child when Zhou Ran was heartbroken. Zhou Ran couldn't resist and gave birth to Yun Mu. When Zhou Ran's mother-in-law saw that Zhou Ran gave birth to another girl, she immediately forced Zhou Ran to have another child. In the end, she couldn't give birth to another child for several years. In the end, she finally gave birth to a boy. That boy was Yun Zhu. However, when Yun Zhu was 8 years old, he was kidnapped for no reason. Zhou Ran's mother-in-law cried, threw a tantrum, and forced Zhou Ran to divorce Yun Jian's father in her previous life. Yun Jian's father in her previous life, Yun Ni, refused. In the end, Zhou Ran's mother-in-law failed to commit suicide by taking sleeping pills. Only then did Yun Ni compromise and divorce his first wife. All these years, Yun Ni and Zhou Ran never gave up looking for Yun Jian and Xiao Yun Zhu. At this moment, Yun Mu was being mocked by these boys, and she fought back by scolding and beating them. When Zhou Ran arrived, the boys were about to take turns to slap Yun Mu in public. "No. Lian Yu is outspoken. Don't lower yourself to her level. If you want to hit me." Zhou Ran rushed over. Just as Zhou Ran rushed over, she suddenly felt a figure that was countless times faster than her flash past. In the next second, the figure suddenly appeared in front of the boys. A second before a boy in front of them was about to slap Yun Mu, the figure reached out and grabbed the boy's wrist. Then, the sound of a wrist bone breaking echoed throughout the room. Crack, crack. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 2577. The boy whose wrist was being pinched by Yun Jian suddenly let out an earth-shattering howl. "Ah! Ah! My hand! Mine!" Crack, crack. Accompanying the boy's scream was the sound of his wrist bones being broken one after another. West Gate Market was the most dilapidated market in the slums. Rather than calling it a market, it was more like a large group of old ladies or grandpas setting up mobile stalls to sell vegetables. There wasn't even a place to sell vegetables in the slums. They just spread out a white cloth on the ground and placed all kinds of vegetables on it. It was a simple way to start selling vegetables. Of course, the slums had no shortage of people. There were too many monks and too little gruel. There were many people and very few residences. At most, each family was given one room. Although West Gate Market was dilapidated, it was filled with people. Just now, when Yun Ran was fighting with a few boys, most people stood aside and watched the show. There were also some who tried to stop the fight, but in the end, it was to no avail. Yun Ran had the appearance of a boy since she was young. She was 1.7 meters tall and looked like a man. Although she was only 18 years old, she looked more mature than Yun Jian. From the side, Yun Ran looked like a fresh and handsome young man. Even the girls were elated when they saw her. These boys were from the same school as Yun Ran and had long treated her as a boy. Seeing that Yun Ran had seduced many girls in school, they hated Yun Ran very much. Just now, they bumped into Yun Ran, who was buying groceries for her mother. Knowing Yun Ran's family background, these boys began to kick up a fuss. Yun Ran was so angry that she started to fight with 4 or 5 boys. Unfortunately, Yun Ran was a girl. If it was a one-on-one fight, Yun Ran was still very strong. However, when it was 4 or 5 against her, she was naturally weaker. The boys all treated Yun Ran as a boy. Those who lost in a group fight would naturally be beaten up. Just now, when these boys were about to beat Yun Ran, Yun Jian appeared. However, not only did she directly grab the wrist of the first boy who wanted to slap Yun Ran, she also used brute force to break the bones in his wrist. His bones were fractured. Chengxia. F***ck. Who is this girl? Get her. Get her. When a friend of the boy whose wrist had been broken by Yun Jian saw this, he shouted at the boy, as if he was completely enraged by Yun Jian's actions. The boys naturally couldn't take this lying down. They joined hands and rushed toward Yun Jian with clenched fists in front of the hundreds of passers-by around the West Gate vegetable market. Ha! UB***TCH. He actually dared to help Yun Yin. Her mother was a jinx. She had once lost her daughter, and now her son had been abducted. She was even chased out of the house by a man. You bastard, don't you know this is our territory? How dare you attack us? F***ck your grandmother. The boys' cusses were extremely unpleasant to the ears. The poorer the place, the worse the security, and the more gangsters on the streets. Suzhou was such a place. The reason why these boys were so arrogant was because they had someone backing them. However, when the boys came in front of Yun Jian and waved their fists at her, the surrounding onlookers thought that Yun Jian was in trouble this time. Yun Yin got up and wanted to help Yun Jian. For some reason, when Zhou Ran saw these people beating up Yun Jian, her heart burned with pain. She wanted to step forward and block the violence of these arrogant boys for Yun Jian. Yun Jian gave a side kick and directly raised her leg high to step on the leading boy. She opened her hands and directly grabbed the sleeves of the two boys behind him. With the strength of her hands, she flung the two boys more than 10 meters away. The last boy was so scared that he didn't dare to come forward. She just sneered and glanced at the last boy. Then, she bent down and stepped on the palm of the boy who had insulted Yun Yin and Zhou Ran with her other foot. Kocha kocha. The sound of the knuckles bones breaking clearly reached everyone's ears. Her method just now was straightforward and efficient, causing everyone to panic. Just when the surrounding people who had never seen such a frightening scene before were about to stop breathing, Yun Jian's cold voice sounded clearly, but it made people tremble with fear. No matter whose territory this used to be, now that I'm here, it's mine. Is there something on my face? Zhou Ran couldn't help but ask when she saw Yun Jian staring at her face. Yun Jian only shook her head slightly. Mom, Dad is here. Just as Zhou Ran finished speaking, Yun Mu rushed in excitedly from outside the door. Behind her was a middle-aged man in his 40s who was dressed in a business suit. This man was Yun Jian's biological father in her previous life, Yun Ni. Shen Tu-wan was an employee of the same company as Yun Ni. However, her position was lower than Yun Ni's. Therefore, God liked her very much and forced Yun Ni to marry her. Yun Ni did not agree and delayed it for so many years. Mistresses have been causing trouble since ancient times. Bitch! How dare you take my family's money after you are divorced? I will beat you to death. The old lady stared at the stack of money in Zhou Ran's hands and was so angry that her hair stood on end. She rushed over and wanted to grab Wan Wen's hair and fight with her to snatch the money. However, just as the old lady's hand was about to land on Zhou Ran, a pair of beautiful hands grabbed the old lady's collar. Who are you? This is my family's business. You are an outsider. Get out of here. The old lady saw Yun Jian suddenly stand up and she scolded Yun Jian. Just as Shen Tu-wan was looking at Zhou Ran smugly and everyone thought that Zhou Ran would back down, Shen Tu-wan's expression changed. Yun Jian pointed at Zhou Ran in front of everyone and uttered a statement that sent a ripple of shock through the crowd with a straight face. I am Yun Jian, her biological daughter who was separated from her 15 years ago. Chapter 2580. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. If we're talking about an outsider, you should be the outsider. Who do you think you are to strut around in my house? Yun Jian grabbed the old lady's hand and uttered the words that were extremely calm to her expressionlessly. Once she spoke, Zhou Ran, who stood where she was with a stack of money, Yun Mu, who rushed up to stop the old lady when she was about to attack Zhou Ran, Shen Tu-wan, who carried a branded bag and was dressed to match Yun Ni, as well as Yun Ni and the old lady herself. Everyone present was completely stunned by Yun Jian's words. You. What did you say? The first one to react was not Zhou Ran but the old lady. At this time, the old lady stared with her pair of black eyes, and a look of horror flashed across her face. Jian? You're Jian. Zhou Ran stared at Yun Jian after she heard what she said. She stared at Yun Jian, her voice soft and her words heavy as she spoke with all her might. Yun and I was dumbfounded as well. The briefcase in his hand fell to the floor with a clatter. Didn't they say they were separated for 15 years? How could they find her? Shen Tuwen had heard of Yun Ni's family background as well, so she exclaimed in disbelief. The old lady's face was terrifyingly dark as well. Are you my elder sister? You're my Yun Jian Jie. Yun Mu was stunned. In the next second, she dashed to Yun Jian and threw herself into Yun Jian's arms. Sis. Yun Mu, who was 18 years old and 5 centimeters taller than Yun Jian, had short hair and looked exactly like a boy. She cried with all her might, tears streaming down her cheeks despite not shedding a single tear for more than a decade. Yun Mu was only 3 years old when Yun Jian was separated from her. When her younger brother was kidnapped, Yun Ying was already in her teens. But Yun Jian was no longer around, so she was the elder sister. From the day her parents divorced, Yun Sheng cut off the long hair that she loved the most for more than 10 years. She swore that she would protect her mother like a boy. Be the pillar of the family. She wanted to protect her mother from being bullied. So she forced herself to live as a boy. After witnessing Yun Jian's skills at the Westgate Market, Yun Mu's face was full of envy. If she had such skills, she wouldn't have been bullied all the time. When she found out that Yun Jian was her biological sister and recalled the way Yun Jian had protected her, she burst into tears on the spot. She was also someone who had her elder sister protecting her. In response to the crowd's bewilderment, Yun Jian spoke calmly, I am. Just because you say so? What if it wasn't? How can you prove that you're Yun Jian who was lost 15 years ago? When the old lady heard that Yun Jian was her long-lost granddaughter, not only was she not agitated, she glanced at Yun Jian instead. To the old lady, other than boys, everyone else had nothing to do with her. Before Yun Jian came out of Zhou Ran's womb, the old lady was so nice to Zhou Ran that she looked like she was going to dig her heart out. When Yun Jian was born naturally and it was a girl, the old lady rushed home from the hospital in a huff and did not visit Zhou Ran again. When she found out about Yun Jian's identity, the old lady was not surprised at all. Instead, she loathed her even more. She must be my Jian. From the first time I saw her, I knew she must be. I can feel it. She's my Jian. Zhou Ran shuddered as the stack of bills in her hands fell to the floor. She rushed over to hug Yun Jian. Money was never as important as her child to Zhou Ran. Opening her mouth, Zhou Ran wanted to say something as happiness came too suddenly. She had thought about it countless times in her dream but she could not bring herself to say it when she saw Yun Jian. Can you call me Mom? Zhou Ran asked, looking up at Yun Jian. Yun Jian looked back at her. Just when Zhou Ran and everyone else thought that Yun Jian would not say it, she pressed her red lips together and said expressionlessly, Mom! What Mom? Stay away from the Yun family from now on. You even took my son's money. So what if you found your daughter? Don't expect mine to raise your daughter for you. You're the woman who lost my eldest grandson. Find my eldest grandson if you have the guts. The old lady pounced to pick up the bills on the floor and started lecturing with clicks of her tongue. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Chapter 2581. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Old Madam was afraid that when Yun Jian came back, Zhou Ran would ask her son for Yun Jian's living expenses. She also hated Zhou Ran for letting her grandson, Yun Zhu, whom she had painstakingly obtained, be abducted. Mom! Yun and I shouted when she heard Old Madam's words. What's wrong? Did you rebel? And are you going to go against your mom for a woman who has nothing to do with you? Don't forget that you're going to marry Wen next month. Wen, isn't she? Old Madam did not wait for Yun and I to finish her words. She picked up the 100 yuan that had slipped from Zhou Ran's hands and stuffed it into her arms, as if she was afraid that someone would snatch it away. She glared fiercely at Yun Jian and Zhou Ran with her round eyes, as if she was afraid that Yun Jian and Zhou Ran would snatch the 100 yuan from her arms. "Auntie, I suggest that we let her do a DNA test to know if she's Ni's daughter. After all, Ni is already a big shot in our company. We must always be on our guard." Shen Tuwen walked to old madam's side and held her hand as if she was following old madam's words. "You're still calling me auntie. You and Ni are going to get married next month. Call me mom." Old madam's attitude towards Shen Tuwen was completely different from Zhou Ran's. She patted the back of Shen Tuwen's hand affectionately and said. After that, she looked at Zhou Ran with deep hatred and said, "Did you hear that? I want you to bring this person who claims to be your daughter to do a DNA test. Also, don't even think about getting a single cent from my family." Bang! Just after old madam finished speaking, Yun Ni slammed her fist on a wooden table. Quang quang quang. The wooden table made a huge shaking sound. Following the shaking sound, Yun Ni roared at old madam angrily and hoarsely. "Enough! Do you think I can't see through my own daughter? Do we need to do a DNA test to see if she's my daughter? I never agreed to the wedding next month. Get married yourself. Other than Ran, I won't marry anyone else in my life. Get out. Get out. Get out of here." Yun Ni was usually an honest person, and Shen Tuwen was also the reason why she liked Yun Ni. If she married Yun Ni in the future, with Ni's temper, Yun Ni's temper, she would be in charge of Yun Ni's way. Yun Ni. Yun Ni old madam, and was? Old Yun was? Old with da? Translation was translation old? Was translation? Translation? Ha! You. Damned woman. Remember this. Don't think that I don't know how much money my borrowed from you. Should that money with Yun, should that amount, it at least money. If you don't return the money, I'll sue you in court tomorrow. Old madam was so frightened by Yun Ni's scolding that she took a few steps back. Then, she looked at Zhou Ran and screamed like a crazy woman. 100,000? After old madam screamed like a lunatic, Yun Jian looked up. Her eyes were cold, and her lips moved slightly as she spoke. "That's right. 100,000. Your mother won't be able to save this amount of money even if she works her whole life. You're still pestering. Or even after you're divorced. Your mother is the mistress." Old madam glared at Yun Ni. Just when old madam thought that Yun Jian would refute her verbally or be surprised that Zhou Ran owed her family so much money, Yun Jian's lips moved slightly. "Oh, 100,000. In the next moment, everyone saw Yun Jian walk to the side and take the travel bag that she had left at the door. Then, in front of everyone, she unzipped the travel bag and turned it upside down. Everyone saw a large stack of US dollar bills falling out of the travel bag. At that moment, Yun Jian squatted down and picked up a stack of US dollar bills from the ground. She waved it at old madam and said expressionlessly, "This stack of 10,000 US dollars is equivalent to more than 60,000 renminbi. I have 500,000 US dollars here, which is more than 3 million renminbi. Old woman, is that enough to pay you back?" Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Chapter 2582. The stacks of banknotes were dug out from the travel bag. Although they weren't red Grandpa Mao banknotes, none of the people present had ever seen so much money in their lives. At this moment, they were all shocked and stood rooted to the ground. The old lady's eyes widened. Her pair of black eyes darted left and right, back and forth. Her face looked as if she had eaten feces and instantly turned as white as ice. "Enough, enough, enough." The old lady looked as if she had been possessed by a ghost as she walked towards Yun Jian. Her eyes were filled with the pile of US dollar bills in front of Yun Jian. Just as the old lady was about to reach Yun Jian in an obsessive manner, a cold smile appeared on Yun Jian's face. Yun Jian's lips curved slightly. Unknowingly, a lighter appeared in Yun Jian's hand. This scene made Shen Tuwen, the old lady, Yun Ni, Zhou Ran, and Yun Ran's eyes widen in shock. "What are you doing? What are you doing, child?" "No." The old lady rushed over like a lunge. However, Yun Jian was one step ahead of her. In front of the old lady, she burned the pile of US dollar bills to ashes. Just as the few people present held their breaths in shock and looked at the scene in front of them in disbelief, Yun Jian's cold voice suddenly rang out. Unfortunately, I won't give you a single cent of this money even if I burn it to ashes. So much money was burned to ashes by Yun Jian in an instant. The old lady and Shen Tu Wen's expressions were the most interesting. It was equivalent to 3 million yuan in banknotes. It was money that they could never earn in their lifetime. Yet, it was burned by Yun Jian just like that. Oh, the money! The old lady was so angry at Yun Jian that her eyes rolled back and she fainted in front of everyone present. Sister! You're so domineering. Yun Lian clapped her hands and looked at Yun Jian with admiration. But sister, how did you get so much money? Yun Ran asked the question that Zhou Ran, Yun and Shen Tu Wen wanted to know. The money belonged to Yun Jian, and Yun Jian had been separated from them for 15 years. Therefore, Zhou Ran and Yun would not say anything about Yun Jian burning the money. After all, she was her biological mother. Yun had already helped the old lady up and rushed to the hospital. Shen Tu Wen also left. After Yun helped the old lady to the hospital and Shen Tu Wen left, Yun Jian said calmly, "It's fake." Puff. Sis, you still have the habit of carrying fake money with you. That old woman was scared out of her wits just now. I've long found her an eyesore. How infuriating. She deserves to be angered to death. Yun Lian laughed. Lian, I'm making dinner. Take Jian out for a walk. Zhou Ran looked at Yun Jian excitedly. I know, Mom. We'll go out for a walk. We'll be back soon. Yun Lian knew that Zhou Ran was going to make something delicious for dinner, so she pulled Yun Jian out excitedly. The residences in the slums were close to each other and the surroundings were messy. It was simple and ordinary, and some places even emitted an awful stench. Yun Meng took Yun Jian away from the slum and went to a school that was equally shabby but had a better environment in comparison. Sis, this is the high school I'm studying in. I'll take you there to take a look. It's Saturday today, and there's no one in school. Yun Ran addressed Yun Jian as her sister smoothly, hooking her arm around Yun Jian's as they walked into the shabby school. Right, sis. What have you been doing all these years outside? Yun Ran pulled Yun Jian through the school gate excitedly. She suddenly thought of something and turned to ask Yun Jian. Yun Jian's eyes glinted at Yun Ran's question. Under Yun Ran's expectant gaze she confessed, I am. Chapter 2583. Page 1/1. Yunjing. It's you. Before Yun Jian could say anything, a male voice came from the entrance of the tiny high school. Upon hearing this, Yun Jian glanced sideways. Then, he saw 3 groups of more than a dozen boys walking over with basketballs. The boy who spoke was the one at the front of the group. He had short hair and was wearing a basketball jersey. He was about 1.85 meters tall. He wasn't the most good-looking among the group of boys, but he was the type that was very pleasing to the eye. Following behind these boys was a group of infatuated girls. Even if this high school wasn't famous, there would always be good-looking boys and girls. This was inevitable. Zhou Qiong, are you guys practicing basketball here again? Yuning looked at the boy and asked. Yun Jian could clearly see Yun Yao blushing slightly when she asked Zhou Qiong a question. Yes. Do you want to come along? Zhou Ming seemed to treat Yun Mu as a boy. He walked over and placed his hand on Yun Mu's shoulder in a very natural manner before asking. As he spoke, Zhou Qiong saw Yun Jian. He nodded and smiled at her before asking Yun Jian, Who is this? I've never seen him before. That's her elder sister. Yun Mu rushed to reply. As she spoke, Yun Mu's face was filled with happiness. Your sister? Your sister is back? Haha, I really wish you all the best. The boy named Zhou Qiong obviously knew about Yun Luo's family background, so he laughed and said, Hello, Sister Yun Jian. My name is Zhou Qiong. I'm a member of our school's basketball team. Zhou Qiong took the initiative to greet Yun Jian. Hello. For the first time, Yun Jian responded. Zhou Qiong, it's time to continue practicing basketball. It won't be long before we have to compete. One of Zhou Qiong's brothers shouted at Zhou Qiong from afar. Okay. Zhou Qiong replied. She then said something to Yun Ran and Yun Jian before walking over. Yun Jian accompanied Yun Yao to watch Zhou Qiong and the others practice basketball for half an hour. At 6 o'clock, The sun was about to set. Zhou Qiong wiped the sweat off his face with his clothes and walked to Yun Yao's side. Yun Mu was holding a kettle in her hand, knowing that she had prepared it for Zhou Qiong. Zhou Qiong, I've prepared some water for you. Just as Zhou Qiong was about to reach Yun Yao, a girl suddenly spoke up. As she spoke, the girl handed her water bottle to Zhou Qiong. Yun Han, why are you fighting with me over the water? You're not a girl. What if people see you handing water to Zhou Qiong and think you're a girl? The girl glanced at Yun Mu with disdain before passing her water to Zhou Qiong before Yun Mu could. No need, I'm not thirsty. Seeing this, Zhou Qiong smiled awkwardly. Actually, it was not that Zhou Qiong was not thirsty, but he did not want to make things difficult for Yun Yao. All right. Hearing this, the girl put the water back. The girl's name is Wan Yu. Bro, I'm here. Guess what I found for you? At this moment, a boy walked over mysteriously with a pile of things. What's that? Why are you acting so mysterious? Someone sat on the steps and asked while drinking water. It's a gun. One of my brothers stole it from home. I heard that it was used during the war in the last century. The parts are all scattered now, but you can admire it. The boy walked to the front of the crowd and showed the parts in his arms to everyone. Seeing this, everyone surrounded him. When these parts are put together, it's the gun that's often shown in movies. Wan Yu, the girl who was fighting with Yun, ran over the water bottle, looked at the parts in the boy's arms in amazement. Yeah, just by looking at these parts, I can't tell what kind of gun it is. The boy holding the parts nodded when he heard Wan Yu's words. Just as everyone was looking curiously at the parts in the boy's arms, a beautiful girl's voice suddenly sounded. The meaning of her words was like a thunderbolt that struck everyone on the spot and made them stare fiercely. This is a Type 64 handgun, the first handgun developed by Country Z. It was designed in 1964 and produced in 1980. It's a more ideal weapon for individual self-defense. Top reading website, M. Chapter 2584. Yun Jian's voice reverberated throughout the hall. Everyone was stunned when they heard what she said. Everyone slowly turned their heads to look at Yun Jian. Their eyes were filled with shock. You know guns? The boy who was holding a pile of gun parts for everyone to admire couldn't hide his shock when he heard Yun Jian's words. Wan Yu, the girl who had fought with Yun Jian to pass water to Zhou Qiong and said that Yun Jian was a man. She also looked at Yun Jian in shock. The girls present were all good-looking. Yun Jian was the most outstanding among them. Everyone was a high school student who had never been out of the city and didn't have many distracting thoughts. Therefore, no one paid too much attention to Yun Jian. Although the people here were poor, they hadn't gone out into society. Therefore, everyone's thoughts were relatively simple. I'm interested, Yun Jian said under everyone's gaze. Interested? Even if you're interested, your family probably doesn't have the funds to let people read about guns, right? Wan Yu interrupted Yun Jian as though she was eager to interrupt Yun Jian. As soon as she finished speaking, Wan Yu immediately turned to look at the boy holding all kinds of gun parts and added, Mu Zishi, other than loving to play basketball, I often see you guys reading books about guns after class, right? She's a girl. Her understanding of guns definitely isn't as profound as yours. Moreover, Mu Zishi, the gun you brought has already been turned into parts. How could she possibly recognize it? Wan Yu didn't hate Yun Jian to the bone at first sight. She also didn't have a reason to hate Yun Jian. However, girls generally held hostility towards women who weren't their friends. At least in their words, they wanted to gain an absolute advantage. Wan Yu was like that. Wan Yu, she's Yun Jian's older sister. Zhou Qiong awkwardly reminded Wan Yu, who thought she was very smart. Hearing this, Wan Yu's face stiffened. That's right, she actually forgot that Yun Jian didn't grow up with Yun Mu. Yun Han's elder sister had been separated when she was 5 years old. This was something that everyone knew. If that was the case, then what she said just now would not be valid. Now, no one knew where Yun Jian had gone and what she had done in the past 15 years. Cough. We only know the basics. Later, my brother will come over. My brother has a deep understanding of handguns. He can answer whatever we don't understand. I got this gun from one of my buddies. I want to show it to everyone first. She broke the awkward atmosphere as he opened his mouth and laughed. Actually, no one believed what Yun Jian said. After all, she was a girl. Would she really be interested in guns? But other people were not like Wan Yu, speaking so firmly. Yun Jian naturally saw it, but she didn't say anything else after saying that. Obviously, she didn't care about what others thought. Sister, I believe you. Yunmu suddenly leaned over to Yun Jian's ear and whispered. Yun Jian heard this and looked up at Yunmu. The moment Yun Jian looked over, Yunmu winked at Yun Jian. Hey! My brother is here. She saw a boy walking over from not far away and stood up excitedly. Go Z! Hurry up and come over here. What kind of gun is this? Tell us. She saw his buddy and raised the pile of gun parts in his hand from afar. Hearing this, the people around them pricked up their ears as if they were waiting to watch a show. Just as everyone pricked up their ears to listen, She's buddy blushed as he was stared at by so many people. He touched his mouth and then said, I'm sorry. He touched his hand and said, I heard that this gun was taken from a foreigner. As soon as he said that, everyone looked at Yun Jian suspiciously. If it was taken from a foreigner, then it definitely wasn't a gun from country Z. It definitely wasn't a Type 64 pistol either. It had to be a foreigner's gun. It was named after a foreigner. Just as everyone was sizing up Yun Jian, She's buddy continued and said something that stunned everyone. The model of the pistol is a Type 64. It's a handgun developed by country Z. It's a type of self-defense weapon. : Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 2585. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation. When everyone heard Brother She say that the handgun was taken from a foreigner, they mistakenly thought that the handgun was made by a foreigner. That meant that the handgun was definitely made by a foreigner, and would not be named after the model name of the handgun in country Z. What She said after that was like a huge slap to everyone who doubted Yun Jian, a resounding slap to their faces. What? Dog, what did you say? Repeat it for us. She heard his brother's words and his face suddenly changed. He looked at his brother and said loudly. She's heart was filled with a huge question mark. He frowned slightly and swept his eyes across the scene. He was stunned for a moment before he said, I said that the model of this gun is a Type 64 handgun that was developed by country Z? What? Did I say something wrong? Just as She's brother finished speaking, She had already jumped down the stairs and walked towards Yun Jian. At the same time, She lightly spoke to Yun Jian. F***CK. You really know guns. Awesome. Just look at these scattered parts and you can recognize the model of the gun. I almost thought that you were in the military. After She's words, his brother finally understood what was going on. She's brother stared at Yun Jian in shock as well and spoke to her in front of the stunned crowd. Brother Yun, you're the one who's being bullied. I have studied guns for so many years. This gun is scattered and I can't even recognize the model of the gun at a glance. May I ask, how did you recognize the gun at a glance? She's brother was called Jing Cheng. He was a very casual person. Usually, other than understanding his own hobbies, he didn't like to talk to others. If he was asked a question in public, he would blush. Now that he heard She's words and knew that Yun Jian was able to recognize the type of pistol with just one glance, Jing Cheng's interest was immediately piqued. He rushed to Yun Jian as if he had picked up a bargain. In fact, it was not only the surrounding people who wanted to know the answer to this question. Even Yunmu was filled with doubts. What had happened to her sister, Yun Jian, in the past 15 years? She guessed it by chance, right? Wan Yu still didn't believe it. She glanced at Yun Jian and was silent for 2 seconds before speaking. Sure enough, after Wan Yu said this, Yun Jian said, It's just a feeling. Did he recognize the model of this pistol just by feeling? To put it nicely, he recognized the pistol based on his intuition. But to put it bluntly, wasn't it just a coincidence? Wan Yu spread her hands and made an expression that said, Look, that's the truth. Wan Yu lived in the poorest slums of Zhuzhou. She was also a frog at the bottom of a well. She didn't know much about pistols and naturally didn't know that there were many types of pistols in the world. For someone who didn't know much about pistols, it was simply a fantasy if you blindly guessed the type of pistol. If someone who didn't know much about pistols guessed it one day, then congratulations. You could immediately buy a lottery ticket and win the 5 million grand prize. Coincidence? You don't know how many types of pistols there are in the world. Jing Cheng argued with Wan Yuyu. Then, when Wan Yuyu's expression changed, he asked Yun Jian again, "Then how did you recognize the model of the pistol by feeling? Can you teach me?" When Jing Cheng spoke to Yun Jian again, he had already changed the way he addressed her from you to you. Who knew that after Jing Cheng asked this, Yun Jian would lightly pat her pants that were stained with dust from sitting on the steps and pull Yun Mu down the steps. Everyone thought that Yun Jian didn't plan to pay attention to Jing Cheng and was about to leave. But who knew that when Yun Jian walked halfway, she suddenly turned around. Her beautiful eyes flashed sharply, but she only left Jing Cheng with a sentence that everyone present didn't quite understand, but they trembled from head to toe. One day when you have no choice but to hold all kinds of guns in your hands and fight enemies, you will naturally be able to recognize the type of gun by feeling. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 2586. Zhou Ran's sister-in-law came to visit. Yun Jian's words were very subtle, giving people a feeling that they didn't fully understand what she meant. However, if one thought about it carefully, what she said was not difficult to understand. The knowledge learned from books was far less clear than the knowledge gained from an hour of actual operation. For example, if you were to learn English from books for 6 years in primary school, 3 years in middle school, and 3 years in high school, a total of 12 years of learning, it would definitely be better than throwing you into an English-speaking country for 2 years. All of Jing Cheng's knowledge of firearms came from books. This kind of knowledge could at best be regarded as rote memorization. What Yun Jian meant was the actual operation. When you are able to operate all kinds of firearms with ease, even if you don't know what kind of firearm it is, or even if you don't know it yourself, it will be deeply imprinted in your mind and can't be erased. Let's go home for dinner. Everyone around them was stupefied by Yun Jian's words. It was not only because Yun Jian was able to say something so profound, but more importantly, it was because Yun Jian was able to say something like that. Did that mean that she was very knowledgeable about firearms, just as she said? She had once had to hold all kinds of guns in her hands to fight the enemy? Country Z was a country that prohibited the use of firearms, and Yun Jian was Yun Mu's biological sister who had been separated from her for 15 years. If you compare this, in that case, where had Yun Ying's sister, Yun Jian, gone all these years? The hearts of everyone present were filled with doubt, and they urgently wanted to know the answer. However, by the time everyone wanted to ask, Yun Jian had already walked far away with Yun Mu. Zhou Qiong, see you tomorrow. After Yun Yao and Yun Jian were more than 10 meters away from the crowd, she turned around and waved at Zhou Qiong. See you tomorrow. Zhou Qiong nodded at Yun Lian. Her short black hair was very dazzling under the setting sun. Even though Yun Mu had thousands of questions that she wanted to ask Yun Jian personally, she still chose to ask after dinner. After returning home, Zhou Ran had already prepared a very sumptuous dinner. A small fish the size of a hand, a plate of homegrown vegetables, a nest of pickled meat and bamboo shoots, and a plate of glutinous rice intestines stir-fried with meat. The last 2 dishes were produced during the new year. Because Zhou Ran's family raised pigs, she was given some pork. She developed the pork and even made glutinous rice sausages. If it was in the past, this amount of food was enough to last Zhou Ran and Yun Yao for 5 days. But today, when Yun Jian came back, Zhou Ran compared the dinner she made in the evening with the previous one. It was much more sumptuous. Jian, I don't know what kind of life you've been living all these years outside. I'm sorry. Zhou Ran's tears fell again as she spoke. It's okay. I've been living well all these years. Yun Jian pressed her lips together and pulled a napkin from the table to pass it to Zhou Ran. Zhou Ran quickly wiped her tears away. Eat. This dish isn't particularly good, but try it. Try Mom's cooking. Zhou Ran stood up to take some food for Yun Jian. Yun Jian ate everything that Zhou Ran took for her. To Yun Jian, she did not have a strong relationship with Zhou Ran since they had not known each other for long. However, Zhou Ran was someone Yun Jian cherished greatly. Clang, clang, clang. While Yun Jian and Zhou Ran were in the middle of their meal, a woman in her 40s rushed in. The woman was holding a metal pot. When she saw Zhou Ran, she placed the pot in front of Zhou Ran and started yelling. "Well done, Zhou Ran. You're really something. How dare you send my mom to the hospital after she fainted from anger? Do you have a conscience? None of us have ever mistreated you when we were in the Yun family. How shameless can you be? My brother has already shown off to you. You're still clinging to him." Chapter 2587. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The person who came was none other than Yun Ni's younger sister, Yun Shan. Yun Shan was Yun Ni's younger sister and Zhou Ran's sister-in-law. In a way, she was still Yun Jian's aunt in name. When Yun Ni and Yun Shan's mother, the old lady, was sent to the hospital because of Yun Jian, Yun Shan rushed over with the iron pot in her house. Yun Shan was furious. She heard that her mother was sent to the hospital because of Zhou Ran's eldest daughter. She was preparing dinner when she heard that Zhou Ran's eldest daughter had returned and was sent to the hospital because of Zhou Ran's eldest daughter. What? That old lady was sent to the hospital because of her own anger. What does it have to do with my mother? Also, when my mother was in your house, she suffered so much because of you. You should be the ones who are shameless. My father and mother were in love with each other. Why did you have to force them to divorce? Old woman. Yun Shan was not one to be scolded. She looked at Yun Shan, who had rushed into her house, and retorted rudely. You. Yun Shan was angered by Yun Shan and took a deep breath. Just as she was about to speak, Zhou Ran pulled Yun Shan over and said to Yun Shan, "You know very well what kind of life I've been living in the Yun family. I, Zhou Ran, don't owe you anything. It's not your turn to interfere in the matter between me and Ni. You little sister-in-law. Yun Ni is still unmarried, and so am I. Zhou Ran. Even if we are divorced, which law forbids us from remarrying? This is my house now. If you don't leave, don't blame me for being merciless. I will sue you for trespassing." Zhou Ran was different from Qin Yiru. Zhou Ran could endure the Yun family's anger because she had married into the Yun family and treated them as her own family. But now that the Yun family had done things so ruthlessly, Zhou Ran naturally couldn't stick to their cold butts. "You! Zhou Ran, you!" Yun Shan was speechless. This was a slum, and the people who lived there were not very rich. Other than the slums in Suzhou, the housing prices in other places were very high. Therefore, both Zhou Ran and the Yun family lived in the slums, which were very close to each other. They couldn't afford to move to another place. Therefore, whether it was the classmates that Yun Jian had met at Yuning High School, the Yun family, or old Madame Yun, they all lived near the slums. Yun Shan was just about to speak when she heard a sudden clamor outside. Then, a series of bang 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 sounds suddenly rang out. Upon hearing this, Yun Jian's narrowed eyes flashed sharply. What happened? Yun Lian was shocked. The law and order in Suzhou was not stable. Z country prohibited the use of handguns, but there were still many gangsters who carried guns. Compared to Longmen City, the gangsters in Suzhou were more cunning. Therefore, the occasional gunshot was not surprising. Yun Shan, your Xiangzi is being hunted down. I told you that nothing good will come out of your Xiangzi hanging out with people from the black market every day. Go down and take a look. The residents near the slums knew each other. One of them rushed to Zhou Ran's house and spoke to Yun Shan. Yun Shan's face paled at the words and she ran down the stairs quickly. The resident obviously knew many people. She glanced at Zhou Ran and hesitated for 2 seconds before speaking to Zhou Ran anxiously. Although you and Yun and I are divorced, I can see that both of you love each other as much as before. I saw Yun and I and Xiangzi together outside just now. They're probably being hunted down together now. Zhou Ran stumbled down the stairs as soon as she finished speaking. Yun Lian and Yun Jian followed closely behind her. After going around 2 junctions, they were getting closer to the sound of gunshots. Yun Jian saw Zhou Qiang, Wan Yuyu, Mu Zixi, and Jing Cheng, whom she had met in school earlier. They were standing there after hearing the gunshots. They were still some distance away from where the gunshots were, but when they heard the noise, all the neighbors came out to see what was going on. It was common knowledge that Yun Shan's husband was a gangster. What's going on? Zhou Ran rushed over to ask. Judging by the sound, it's not good. I heard that Yun and I sent her mother to the hospital and came back. How did this happen? An old man spoke anxiously as he propped himself on the ground with his walking stick. What should we do then? Zhou Ran's face was pale. I've already asked someone to contact the police station. I just don't know if we can make it in time, someone said. Just as the words were spoken, the group saw a slender silhouette walking past them. Yun Jian was walking around the crowd toward the source of the gunshots. Jian, what are you doing? Zhou Ran hurried over to stop her. Sis, I know you're worried and so am I. But there's nothing we can do if we go. Yun Lian spoke up as well, her panicked expression betraying her. Just when everyone thought that Yun Jian was frightened by the incident, they saw Yun Jian pulling out a shiny silver pistol from her waistcase right in front of Zhou Qiang, Wan Yuyu, Mu Zixi, Jing Cheng, and everyone else. Everyone was stunned. Yun Jian glanced sideways at Yun Zhan with a red smirk on her face as she uttered something that caused an uproar and stupefied everyone present. Didn't you want to know what I've been doing all these years outside? I'll tell you with my actions now. Translator. Henyi Translations Editor. Henyi Translations. Chapter 2588. As soon as Yun Jian finished speaking, she stood in front of everyone. Her slender, tall, and flawless figure deeply attracted everyone's attention. Coupled with the words that just came out of her red lips, Yun Lian, who was standing in the front and looking at Yun Jian, suddenly widened her dark eyes. It was a shiny silver Browning pistol. The pistol was very light and made people want to reach out and touch it just by looking at it. At least, Jing Cheng, who loved guns very much, widened his eyes. He was shocked that Yun Jian had a pistol and envied the pistol in Yun Jian's hand. That's a Browning pistol made in Country M. It's very popular on the market and one of the most difficult pistols to get. Just when everyone was shocked that Yun Jian had a gun in her hand, whether it was Wan Yuyu, Mu Zixi, Zhou Qiang, Yun Ran, Yun Lian, Zhou Ran, or Yun Jian's nominal aunt, Yun Shan, all of them widened their eyes after Yun Jian finished speaking. Jing Cheng's surprised and stunned words were also heard. At the end of his words, everyone was stunned again by Jing Cheng's words. They were not only shocked by Yun Jian's words, but also shocked by the gun in Yun Jian's hand. They even questioned what kind of person Yun Jian was. She could actually get the most popular pistol on the market, which was extremely difficult to get. She was not an ordinary person. She could do it. He was indeed a young man who loved guns to the bone. Even at this time, he still remembered the model of the gun. Yun Jian smiled. It had been less than 20 seconds since Yun Jian had taken out the silver pistol and said those words. After hearing Jing Cheng's words, she took out another Beretta 92F pistol from the waistcase on her other side, which was so hidden that no one could see it, and threw it at Jing Cheng. Yun Jian suddenly threw a gun at him. Jing Cheng didn't know why. He hurriedly caught the Beretta 92F that Yun Jian threw at him. When he raised his head, Yun Jian had already disappeared. He only left behind a sentence that made Jing Cheng's blood boil. Protect my sister and mother from me, and I'll give you this pistol. The group of people who were left behind blinked their eyes fiercely. Their hearts were filled with complex emotions. Especially Wan Yuyu, her expression changed the most. Yun Lian lived like a boy and even fought with boys. She did not act like a girl at all. This was the reason why Wan Yuyu had always mocked Yun Mu. When he first met Yun Jian, he thought that as Yun Jian's older sister, Yun Jian should be gentle and virtuous. But she actually carried such a dangerous handgun with her at all times. The girls in the Yun family were each more ferocious than the other. Were they all the same as the boys? No, they were even more manly than the boys. In an alley at the entrance of the slum, Yun Shan's husband, Xiang Zi, dragged Yun and I into an alley to hide. The two of them hid behind a pile of garbage that was 5 meters high at the entrance of the alley. Yun Shan's husband, Xiang Zi, was called Wen Zhengxiang. Unlike his wife, Yun Shan, Wen Zhengxiang was a very upright person. In his early years, because his family was poor and could not afford to eat, they could not even afford to raise the children at home. Therefore, Wen Zhengxiang joined the black market gang in Suzhou. After rolling around in the gang for a few years, Wen Zhengxiang was now a well-known figure in the Suzhou gang. However, because of this, he had made many enemies. This time, the person who suddenly chased after him was his mortal enemy. Yun and I, you go first. Go around the back of the alley. Run. When Zhangxiang saw that the road was blocked, he pushed Yun and I and shouted, "Ha ha ha! Run! No one can run away." As soon as Wen Zhangxiang finished speaking, 4 or 5 pistols were aimed at Wen Zhangxiang and Yun and I from different angles. A man with a big X scar on his face appeared in front of Wen Zhangxiang and Yun and I. He smiled wickedly. "Wen Zhangxiang, I caught you this time. You're dead. You'll die on your own. You even dragged a relative down with you. How nice." The man glared at Yun and I fiercely, waved his hand at his subordinates and shouted, "Fire! Beat the 2 of them into a hornet's nest." Bang 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 bang. As soon as the man finished speaking, a series of gunshots rang out. The man's 5 subordinates, who were holding guns and pointing the muzzles at Wen Zhangxiang and Yun and I, were shot in the wrists one after another along with the gunshots. The guns fell to the ground. The man's subordinates held their wrists and shouted. When the man saw this, he was so scared that his face turned pale. He quickly turned his head to look. 10 meters away, he saw a young girl standing on the 2nd-floor balcony of a house. She calmly put away her pistol and looked at him coldly. Then she said something that would send people to hell. "Who dares to touch a strand of my father's hair? I'll blow your head off." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2589. The man's expression changed drastically when he saw his 5 subordinates being shot by Yun Jian in the wrists that were holding their guns. While the man was still in shock, Yun Jian was already holding onto the 2nd-floor balcony that was more than 10 meters away. She jumped from the simple balcony that was 3 meters above the ground to the flat ground easily. Then, her long ponytail swayed at her waist as she walked over like the wind. Yun Jian was dressed in a black top and loose black pants. She was holding a shiny silver pistol in her hand. She looked like the queen of the night, showing off her graceful figure in the evening that was about to descend the mountain. Jian. Yun and I stared at the silver pistol in Yun Jian's hand in disbelief. His expression was terrifyingly dark. "Yun and I, this is the daughter you brought home yourself?" Wen Zhangxiang's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared blankly. As a member of the black market, how could he not know about such an aura? Yun Ni's daughter that had been lost for 15 years. In the 15 years that they were separated, could it be that? F***CK. Consider yourselves lucky. It won't be this easy next time. The man with the huge X scar on his face turned and ran after he said that when he realized that the timing was not right. When his subordinates saw this, they also chased after the man with the big X scar on his face. Wen Zhangxiang and Yun and I breathed a huge sigh of relief when they saw this. "Yun and I, your daughter is amazing. If it wasn't for your daughter, we..." Wen Zhangxiang held his arm that was grazed just now and told Yun and I. However, just as he said that, bang! A gunshot that startled the birds on the telephone pole and sent them flying away suddenly rang out when Wen Zhangxiang was halfway through his conversation with Yun and I. On the other side, the scarred man, who had a big X on his face, was about to run away when a bright bullet pierced through the middle of his head. The scarred man's body swayed and his footsteps stopped. In the next second, he fell to the ground with a plop and no longer moved. F***CK. F***CK. Yun and I, your daughter, your daughter. Seeing this, Wen Zhangxiang stood up in shock. He covered the abrasions on his arm and ran to where the scarred man had fallen. In this era, it was illegal to kill people. But generally, in a place like Zhuzhou, there were more hooligans and gangsters. If you had someone to protect you, it would be fine. It was common for people to die in the black market. However, Wen Zhangxiang did not expect that Yun Jian would actually kill someone. She was just a teenage girl. What had he encountered in the past? After killing someone, he didn't even bat an eyelid. Bring your leader's body back. Tell your gang members that if they want revenge, come to 309 Jindonkyo Road in the slums and look for me, Yun Jian. Without waiting for Wen Zhangxiang to speak, Yun Jian put away her gun and coldly spoke to the dead man's subordinates. When the man's subordinates heard this, they were stunned. In the next second, they lifted the man's body and left as if they were fleeing. It was only when everything quieted down that Wen Zhangxiang looked at Yun Jian. Scratching his head throbbing, he looked at her and said, "I'm sorry. How could you kill him? You'll have to go to jail." Yun and I also walked over, trembling all over. She was trembling because Yun and I was afraid that her daughter would be forcibly arrested and sent to jail as soon as she came back. It was all his fault. It was all because he, as a father, did not do his duty and did not educate her properly. Yun and I also scratched her head. Just as Yun and I and Wen Zhengxiang looked anxious, Yun Jian suddenly spoke. Her words were still as cold as ice. "You have to dig up the roots to cut the weeds. He deserved to die." Chapter 2590. What kind of environment made Yun Jian the person she was today? Yun and I and Wen Zhengxiang didn't understand. The two of them hurriedly brought Yun Jian back to Yun Ni's house. The neighbors who were standing at the intersection and didn't dare to go forward when they heard the gunshots had already gone home. Only Yun Ran's classmates, Zhou Qiang, Wan Yuyu, Mu Zixi, Jing Cheng, and Yun Shan, followed in. "Dad, what's wrong with you guys being so flustered? Also, you guys should be fine just now, right? Dad, did sister save you guys? Sister is also a gangster like uncle-in-law, right?" Yun Ran looked at Yun and I and asked curiously. As she spoke, she looked up at her uncle-in-law, Wen Zhengxiang. "Lian, let your classmates go home first." Yun and I glanced at Zhou Qiang and the others and said to Yun Ran in a panic, "Uncle, we won't say anything. We just want to hear how Yun Ran's sister saved you and uncle-in-law just now." Wan Yuyu said after Yun and I finished speaking. This was an interesting matter. Of course, everyone wanted to know what had happened as soon as possible. Therefore, none of them were willing to leave. "You guys, nothing happened just now. Nothing happened," Yun and I said against her will. As she spoke, Yun and I pressed her fingers to her forehead and revealed a helpless expression. Once this kind of thing happened, the gang that the man who was shot by Yun Jian belonged to would definitely come looking for them. Just now, that man did want to kill Yun and I and Wen Zhengxiang, but that man definitely had someone protecting him. Now, Yun Jian killed him instead. "Yun and I, come here." Wen Zhengxiang waved at Yun and I. When Yun and I came over, Wen Zhengxiang leaned over and whispered in Yun Ni's ear, "I'll go to our gang and beg our boss to see if he can save your daughter." As he spoke, Wen Zhengxiang ran out of the door. "Xiangzi, please." Yun and I shouted at Wen Zhengxiang. Both of them thought that Yun Jian had killed that man and had no power or influence. She was doomed for the rest of her life. However, what they didn't know was that when the two of them were extremely anxious, Yun Jian was sitting on the bench with a calm expression, without the slightest trace of panic. Zhe Province. Min City. Mu Ying's house. Mu Ying, who had taken the medicine made by Yun Jian, was completely fine. It wouldn't be a problem for Mu Ying to live for a few more decades. The feeling of her body rejecting her soul had already disappeared. Mu Ying and Mad Dragon began to live a sweet life again. However, Mu Ying found that after she gave her body to Mad Dragon, although the two of them ate a lot of forbidden fruit, Mad Dragon didn't take off his shirt every time they did it. Even when she boldly proposed to take a bath with him with a blushing face, Wild Dragon rejected her flatly. This made Mu Ying very uncomfortable. However, she wanted to take a bath with him. Humph. Walala. The sound of Mad Dragon taking a shower came from the bathroom. Mu Ying took the bathroom key and quietly walked to the bathroom door. She inserted the key into the bathroom door lock. With a kacha sound, the door was opened by her. However, when she entered the door, Mad Dragon had already put on a bathrobe and was looking at her with his arms crossed. Seeing this, Mu Ying pouted and turned to walk out. Break up, break up. I want to run away from home." Just as she turned around and took 2 steps, Mad Dragon rushed over and hugged Mu Ying from behind. "I won't allow it. Even if you die, you can only die in my arms." Mu Ying took advantage of the moment when Mad Dragon reached out and hugged her back to pull off the tie on Mad Dragon's bathrobe. She turned around and looked at Mad Dragon's upper body with a look of success on her face. However, what she saw were deep and shallow marks that were obviously imprinted not long ago. It looked like a chest that had been deliberately tortured. The wounds were shocking. Wonderful book house. Com. Chapter 2591. These marks and wounds were all left by Mad Dragon when he learned about Mu Ying's physical condition and asked the perverted doctor's son for medicine. The perverted doctor's son burned them with iron and branded them. Even a thick-skinned person would not be able to withstand this kind of punishment that was similar to ancient torture. But Mad Dragon endured it for the sake of his beloved woman. He could have avoided this punishment. With Mad Dragon's own strength, he could have beaten the perverted doctor's son hundreds of times. But for Mu Ying, he did not say a word and forced himself not to use his strength to endure this punishment. This is. Mu Ying saw the scars on Mad Dragon's chest and instantly burst into tears. She carefully stroked Mad Dragon's chest and said with a flustered expression, This is the medicine you and Ss asked for me last time? Mu Ying was very smart and hit the nail on the head with one sentence. But just as Mu Ying finished speaking and her tears were about to flow out of her eyes again, Mad Dragon suddenly bent down and kissed her eyes, kissing away the tears that were about to flow out of her eyes. So you can't say anything about leaving me again in this life, or I'll kill you with my own hands and accompany you to hell. Even if he went to hell, he, Mad Dragon, would never let go of her hand. She could only be his woman. If not, then they would go to hell together. Hey Province. Suzhou. Wen Zhengxiang, who had hurriedly ran to find his gang's boss, returned to Zhou Ran's house. As soon as he entered Zhou Ran's house, Wen Zhengxiang rushed into Zhou Ran's house and said to Yun Jian anxiously, without caring that Zhou Qiao, Wan Yuyu, Mu Zixi, Jing Cheng, and other classmates were still there. Our boss agreed to save you. But he needs to know which gang you're from. Your gang's code name. When Wen Zhengxiang said this, his face was filled with anxiety. To Wen Zhengxiang, it was because of him that Yun Jian was in this situation. Therefore, he had to bear this responsibility. Gang. Code name? Sister, are you really a gangster too? Yun Lian was shocked and asked in a daze. Ever since Yun Jian had said to Yun Mu before she went to save people, Don't you want to know what I've been doing all these years? I'll use my actions to tell you. Whether it was Yun Mu or everyone present, they all thought that Yun Jian had been involved in the underworld all these years. Now that when Zhengxiang asked Yun Jian this question, everyone present was even more convinced of this point. Gangsters at such a young age? So powerful. When Mu Zixi heard this, he was somewhat stupefied. Although they didn't know what Wen Zhengxiang meant when he said that he wanted to save Yun Jian, everyone's attention was now diverted to Yun Jian's identity. Seeing that Yun Jian didn't speak for a long time, Wen Zhengxiang immediately spoke. Our gang is a reputable gang in Country Z. Our position in the entire Country Z's gangs is already in the top 15. Although there's still a huge gap between us and the #1 Falcon Hall, we'll protect you. Absolutely no problem. The #1 gang in Country Z was Falcon Hall, which was now under the control of Su Zetian. Speaking of Falcon Hall, it was practically a legend. The boss of Falcon Hall was an unfathomable woman, and the current person in charge of Falcon Hall, Su Zetian, was a very powerful person. Wah! Yun Han, your uncle-in-law is actually a member of such a powerful gang. After hearing Wen Zhengxiang's words, Jing Cheng exclaimed to Yun Mu. Amazing. Wan Yuyu couldn't help but be stunned. On the other hand, Wen Zhengxiang's gaze was fixed on Yun Jian. Just when everyone thought that Yun Jian wouldn't speak, or that she would reject Wen Zhengxiang's claim that she was from a gang, Yun Jian suddenly said, Do you really want to know? Yes. Because only by knowing this will our gang's boss be willing to send people to protect you. Wen Zhengxiang said solemnly. Everyone's gaze shifted to Yun Jian. At this moment, Yun Jian's red arc rose. She saw that Zhou Ran, Yun and Yun Mu were all looking at her with expressions that said they wanted to know what she had been doing all these years. Pursing her red lips, Yun Jian spoke coldly in front of everyone, but her name was like a sudden tsunami that swept through everyone's hearts. The gang I'm in is called Falcon Hall. Code name. Rakshasa. : Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 2592. Page 1/1. Everyone sucked in a deep breath when they heard Falcon Hall. Yun Jian was actually from Falcon Hall. It was no wonder that she possessed such strength. Falcon Hall was indeed a legendary gang. A young girl of Yun Jian's age could be trained to such an extent. Everyone's eyes widened and their jaws dropped when they realized that Yun Jian was actually from Falcon Hall. After all, Not everyone could join a gang like Falcon Hall just because they wanted to. If the 3 words Falcon Hall had led the crowd to believe that Yun Jian had joined Falcon Hall and become an insignificant figure, it would have been the truth. Then the 2 words Rakshasa at the back smashed everyone's heads hard, causing everyone present to be stunned on the spot, unable to react for a long time. What did you say? When Zhang Xiang couldn't help but roll his eyelids. He stared at Yun Jian in disbelief, then asked loudly and sharply. Wasn't Rakshana the woman who led Falcon Hall to become the #1 gang in Country Z in just a few years? Wasn't she supposed to be a legendary young woman in her 30s? What's wrong? How could he be so much younger than what the legend said? Mu Zishi was also looking at Yun Jian in astonishment. He licked his dry lips, completely losing his composure in front of his classmates. Obviously, there were many gangs in Suzhou, and the security there was not very good. Therefore, the people in Suzhou were more gangsters, especially those who lived in the slums. They were completely different from Qin Yiru and the others who lived in Xinjiang town in Longmen City. Everyone knew about these gangs. Mu Zishi looked at Yun Jian's back in front of him. Just as he was about to shout, he saw Yun Jian slowly turn around. Her high ponytail flowed naturally, giving off a cool and forthright feeling. All around, the silence was frightening. Yun Ni, Zhou Ran, and Yun Mu were so shocked that their faces trembled slightly. Yun Shan was pale with fright. Wen Zhengxiang's expression changed slightly, but he was also slightly stunned. As for Yun Mu's classmates, Zhou Qiang, Wan Yuyu, Mu Zishi, and Jing Cheng, they were stunned when they heard that Yun Jian was the nationally renowned boss of Falcon Hall at such a young age. After a while, Yun Jian, who stood in front of everyone, turned slightly, her lips curling into a stunning red arc as she nodded without denying it. That's right. Falcon Hall is mine. 10 minutes later, Yun Jian sat on one of the few benches in Zhouran's house, surrounded by a dozen pairs of eyes. God, I can't believe it. Falcon Hall was founded single-handedly by Yun Ai's sister. Zhou Qiong scratched her short hair and asked Yun Jian in astonishment. The legendary boss of Falcon Hall, Luo Sha, is a woman whose talent, strength, and looks are on par with hers. Looks like she really lives up to her name. Mu Zishi adjusted his glasses on the bridge of his nose and said knowledgeably. I was worried for nothing. Wen Zhengxiang said with a smile as he wiped the sweat from his forehead that he had just been scared out of. Yun Jian ignored everyone's shocked gazes. She stood up and scanned the surroundings. Then, her gaze landed on Yun Ni, Zhou Ran, and Yun Mu. She said, I can't tell you everything that happened in the past 15 years, but since I'm back, I won't let you live like that anymore. I bought a villa worth 30 million yuan in the modern villa forest on the outskirts of Suzhou. Take it as my gift to you. Translator. Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios. Chapter 2593. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. The poorest people in Suzhou lived in the slums. The wealthiest people in Suzhou lived in the modern villas in the suburbs. One would have to be worth at least 5 million yuan to move to the modern villas in the suburbs. In this era, a villa worth more than 30 million yuan was the kind of luxurious villas that were often shown in television dramas. It would take 3 to 5 minutes to drive from the villa's entrance to the Shen family's courtyard. Yun Jian's words were undoubtedly a blow to everyone present. F***CK. Mu Zishi slapped the table hard and stood up at once. Due to the shock, Mu Zishi accidentally tripped when he stood up and fell to the floor with a thud. He did not even care about the pain as he looked up at Yun Jian. F***CK. Rich. Bro, help me check if my heart is still in my chest. Oh my god, I'm about to pee my pants. Mu Zishi grabbed his buddy Jing Cheng's hand, looking like he had aged from the shock. Cut it out. Jing Cheng hit Mu Zishi while he was down and pressed his finger against Mu Zishi's forehead. Wan Yuyu's entire body had already stiffened into a stone statue, not moving at all. Yun Shan was so envious that her saliva was about to drip onto the floor, but Wen Zhengxiang's expression remained unchanged. Logically, Zhou Ran and Yun Ni, as Yun Jian's biological parents, should be overjoyed. After all, Yun Jian had been doing well all these years to be able to give them a villa worth 30 million yuan as a greeting gift. However, Zhou Ran sensed something when she heard Yun Jian's words. She rushed to Yun Jian under everyone's gaze and grabbed Yun Jian's hand to ask Yun Jian loudly. Jian, you're still leaving? Aren't you going to stay by our side? As expected of her biological mother, Zhou Ran immediately understood the meaning behind Yun Jian's words. Big sister, are you not going to live with us? Yun Yin also looked at Yun Jian with an expectant expression and asked. Everyone's heart tightened slightly. Everyone hadn't realized it earlier, but now they all realized it. Since Yun Jian was the boss of Falcon Hall, Rakshasa, it meant that her future path would be completely different from the rest of them. Naturally, her life could not be fixed in the small Tsuzhou of He province. Under the expectant gazes of Yun Mu, Zhou Ran, and Yun Ni, Yun Jian's raised eyebrows slightly smoothed out. She still spoke with a superficial expression, which made everyone present realize that Yun Jian's words were different from the rest. I'm sorry, but I won't stop moving forward for anyone. Staying here is not a life that suits me. From the moment I was abducted and stepped into the world I lived in, the ordinary life of an ordinary person had already left me. If I take a step back, I'll be facing a bottomless abyss. There's no room for choice. So, this is all I can do for all of you. Yun Jian's words were a little confusing to those who heard her. Yun Jian's identity as the boss of Falcon Hall, Rakshasa, was destined to be extraordinary. In spite of it, the group understood the other meaning behind Yun Jian's words. Could it be that her identity was far more than that? They could not help feeling doubtful. Just as they were feeling doubtful, Yun Jian, who was sitting on the bench in front of them, stood up. Her red arc slightly pursed, and under everyone's gazes, she continued to speak to Yun Ni, Zhou Ran, and Yun Lian, saying a sentence that caused everyone to boil with anger. Back then, my younger brother was abducted because of me. Those people kidnapped him to threaten me in order to control me. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Chapter 2594. Originally, Yun Ni, Zhou Ran, and Yun Mu were still grieving over Yun Jian's unwillingness to live a normal life with them. Yun Ni and Zhou Ran even hated themselves for losing Yun Jian back then, which put Yun Jian in a dilemma. The boss of Falcon Hall must have gone through a lot to get to where she was today. However, Yun Ni, Zhou Ran, Yun Mu, Wen Zhengxiang, Yun Shan, Zhou Ran, Wan Yu, and everyone else present still underestimated Yun Jian's status. They thought that being the boss of Falcon Hall was already an incredible thing. However, everyone knew that being the boss of Falcon Hall was not enough for them to go through a lot of hardships to dig out Yun Jian's family background, and then come all the way to Tsuzhou to kidnap Yun Jian's biological brother, Yun Zhu, to threaten Yun Jian. Then, did Yun Jian have another identity? Wen Zhengxiang widened his black eyes and stared straight at Yun Jian. What? Sure he. After hearing Yun Jian's words, Zhou Ran recalled how Yun Zhu was deliberately captured. She never thought that her son was kidnapped because of her long-lost daughter. Before Zhou Ran could voice her doubts, an unpleasant voice that was hoarser and coarser than a rooster's voice came first. What? My precious eldest grandson was lost because of a woman like you who can't even grow a beard. The voice was almost roaring. Judging from the unpleasant voice, it was hard to tell whether the voice belonged to a man or a woman. Yun Jian glanced over and saw her nominal grandmother, who had fainted because of Yun Jian's anger, rushing into the room. She was also cursing in the local language, which was extremely unpleasant to hear. The old lady hated Yun Jian because Yun Jian was her granddaughter. As soon as she entered the room, the old lady happened to hear Yun Jian say that her bastard grandson was lost because of Yun Jian. Therefore, the old lady's disgust for Yun Jian instantly exploded to the freezing point. When the old lady entered the room, everyone in the room saw that there were many people following behind her. When Zhou Ran saw the group of people following the old lady, her expression changed. You better make yourself clear. How is it because of you that my grandson was lost? Give my grandson back to me. Otherwise, the Yun family will not let you off. The old lady glared fiercely at Yun Jian with bulging eyes. Behind the old lady were all the aunts and aunts of the Yun family. Everyone who had anything to do with the Yun family was here. Everyone lived in the slums, so even the commoners had formed cliques. Whichever family had more people would be able to do whatever they wanted in the slums. Everyone look. This is my unfilial granddaughter. You heard it. My pitiful grandson was harmed by this damned woman who can't even grow a mane after being hacked 1,000 times. I don't know who she offended. She even caused the death of my poor grandson. The old lady called Yun Jian a woman who couldn't grow a penis. Just from thinking about it, one could imagine how stubborn the old lady's preference for boys was. The old lady and the others did not hear Yun Jian calling herself the boss of Falcon Hall. Now, the old lady took the lead and rushed into the room to surround Yun Jian, Zhou Ran and the others. Mom, why are you out of the hospital so soon? Yun and I glanced at the old lady. What? You unfilial son, do you want me to die in the hospital? The old lady put her hands on her hips and looked arrogant. After she finished speaking, the old lady pointed at Yun and I and said to the group of Yun family members she brought with her. Everyone, help me catch this unfilial son. Yun and I has to agree to the wedding next month even if she doesn't want to. I've worked so hard to raise you. Don't tell me that I can't control you. The group of Yun family members that the old lady brought with her were all her relatives. 2 of them were the old lady's sons other than Yun and I, and a few of them were the descendants of Yun Ni's father's brothers. All her close relatives were present. After the old lady finished speaking, the group of adults from the Yun family immediately rushed over fiercely to catch Yun and I. Yun Ni's eyelids twitched. Zhou Ran's heart ached. Back then, the old lady had forced Zhou Ran and Yun and I to divorce like this. However, just as the large group of Yun family members were about to approach Yun and I, a petite figure stood in front of Yun and I. The beautiful girl looked up slightly. In front of the dozen or so tall and strong men of the Yun family, she did not show a trace of fear. On the contrary, she expressionlessly curled her lips and provoked them. If you want to take my father away, defeat me first. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2595. Yun Jian had actually thought of letting Yun and I, Zhou Ran, and Yun Mu move to Longmen City. However, it was impossible. Humans were sentient creatures. No matter how tough life was, they would not be willing to leave after living in a place for half their lives. Zhou Ran and Yun and I were the same. Here, however, the old lady would force Yun and I to marry a woman she did not like. The Yun family still retained the old tradition of obeying one's parents when it came to marriage. Therefore, the uncles of the Yun family were on the old lady's side. They surrounded Yun Jian, Yun and I, Yun Mu, and Zhou Ran like they were crusading against evil. Logically, even if Yun Jian was the boss of Falcon Hall, it should be a little difficult for her to face so many people, should it not? In spite of it, Wen Zhangxiang did not think so much. Stop it! Stop it now! Wen Zhangxiang was afraid that the Yun family would really lay their hands on Yun Jian, so he quickly stepped forward to stop them. Yun Jian, she was. Xiangzi, stay out of this. Move aside. Otherwise, we'll beat you up too. A tall and plump middle-aged man from the Yun family pushed Wen Zhangxiang away and hollered. The tall and plump middle-aged man glared at Yun Jian as he spoke. Little girl, you're so arrogant. I'll give you one more chance. If you don't move aside, I'll kill you. The tall and plump middle-aged man bellowed as if he was quarreling. Those who were seated at the side trembled when they heard him. The tall and plump middle-aged man was Yun Zhou, who was 195 meters tall. He was the strongest person in the Yun family, and was very obedient to the old lady. Yun Zhou was the old lady's other son. In terms of seniority, he was ranked after Yun and I. Strictly speaking, he was Yun Jian's uncle. The old lady wore a smug expression when she saw this. Yun Zhou stretched out his muscular arm and swung it at Yun Jian in front of everyone. There was no way Yun Jian's petite frame would be able to take the blow. Jian-er! Jian-er! Yun and I and Zhou Ran shouted and were about to rush forward. However, before Yun Jian could smash his arm, which was 3 times as thick as Yun Jian's thigh, Yun Jian's petite figure gently moved to the side. In the next second, her nimble snake-like hands coiled around Yun Zhou's arm, which was 3 times as thick as her thighs, and fiercely grabbed him. In an instant, everyone saw Yun Zhou being flung up by Yun Jian and smashed onto a round table not far away. The shabby round table instantly collapsed. The newspapers, bowls, and chopsticks on the round table all slipped to the ground. By the time Yun Zhou reacted, he had already been flung away by Yun Jian. He let out a painful wail. "Shower! You! How dare you!" The old lady stared at Yun Jian, surprised by Yun Jian's ability, and abhorred Yun Jian for daring to touch her precious son. "Auntie, where's your precious grandson now? Aren't you going to ask?" A woman who came with the old lady reminded the old lady. The old lady came back to her senses at that and looked up at Yun Jian, speaking to Yun Jian with a chilling expression. "You touched my son and caused my grandson to be kidnapped. Now tell us clearly, why did those people kidnap my grandson? What exactly did you do? Let us find my grandson and I'll let bygones be bygones." The old lady was still confident, refusing to give up until she saw the coffin. Everyone's heart sank when they heard what the old lady said as they turned to look at Yun Jian. Even Yun and Zhou Ran, Zhou Qiong, and Mu Zishi, who had heard from Yun Jian that she was the boss of Falcon Hall, all looked at Yun Jian. Their instincts told them that Yun Jian's identity was far more than that. They thought that Yun Jian would retaliate verbally with the old lady's threatening expression, or that she would not mention what she had done in the past to attract people to kidnap Yun Zhu and threaten her. However, Yun Jian stepped on the newspaper that had slid to the ground from the table and kicked it in front of everyone. On the newspaper, there was a headline titled, "Many young children were kidnapped and sent to assassin organizations to train for many years to become killing machines, killing 1,009 people in 3 years." Everyone's hearts trembled when they saw this. If they guessed correctly, it was the same for Yun Jian 15 years ago. Just when everyone was puzzled and had a vague answer in their hearts, Yun Jian raised her slightly lowered eyes in front of everyone. Under her bangs, her dark eyes were instantly dyed red with blood vessels. Under everyone's gaze, she said something that made the old lady faint, the Yun family members scared half to death, and Yun and Zhou Ran, Zhou Qiong, and the others terrified and shocked. "I've killed many people over the years, so naturally, I've made more enemies. If they touch my father again, I don't mind killing a few more. After all, the number of people I've killed is much more than the number of third-rate assassins in this newspaper." Wonderful Book House. Com. Chapter 2596. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor, Endless Fantasy Translation, page 1/1. After all, the number of people I've killed is much more than these third-rate killers in the report. The last sentence left Yun Jian's red arc quietly. The old lady, who was originally full of murderous intent towards Yun Jian, Yun Zhou, who was grabbed by Yun Jian and smashed the round table, and more than 10 people in the Yun family, including Yun and Zhou Qiong, all looked at Yun Jian, who was emitting a gloomy aura from head to toe. Their hearts couldn't help but tremble slightly. Yun Jian's words were clearly flat without any ups and downs, but the meaning in her words was extremely frightening. When Yun and heard this, he rushed forward and reached out to grab the newspaper that Yun Jian had kicked in front of the old lady and the dozen people in the Yun family. His hands trembled like a spring as he read the headline of the big news in the newspaper with a trembling voice. "Have you ever seen a killing machine more powerful than the killer agents in the movies? According to the confession of the 10 killers who were arrested 9 years ago, they were abducted into the killer organization and underwent inhumane training with thousands of children. In the end, there were only 20 killers left. They went on missions for 3 years and killed a total of 1,009 people. It is reported that more than half of the children who were abducted more than 10 years ago were sent to the killer organization." When he read this, Yun and looked at the news report in the newspaper and couldn't continue. Coupled with Yun Jian's confession just now, in these years she... Plop! The old lady was so frightened that she sat on the ground. Everyone in the Yun family avoided Yun Jian as if she were a tiger. Zhou Qiong, Wan Yuyu, Mu Zishi, Jing Cheng, and the others were pale. Zhou Ran's expression was the same as Yun Ni's and Yun Mu's. There wasn't much change in her expression. "Call the police, call the police." The old lady sat on the ground, her eyes blank. She trembled as she turned over and crawled out of the door. The meaning of Yun Jian's words wasn't obvious. However, everyone present could tell what he meant. In the 15 years that she was abducted, she was probably abducted into the killer organization. How could someone who could survive in the killer organization be weak? When the old lady heard that Yun Jian was an assassin from the killer organization, she was already scared half to death and crawled out of the door. Unfortunately, she didn't know that Yun Jian was the king of the killer agents. "Ha! Call the police?" Everyone suddenly heard these 3 words from Yun Jian's words. Yun Jian's voice, Yun Jian's voice, Yun Jian's, the old lady's, and crawled out of the door. Just as the old lady was just when the old lady, the old was just right just the old lady and the dagger translation translation, translation. Translation 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 translation. En translation translation Lu Yu translation 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 as translation is translation to translation. The old lady straightened her body, rolled her eyes, and felt a chill down her spine. Before everyone could react, Yun Jian had already come to the old lady's side. She pressed a small blade against the old lady's chin and used the cold blade to lift the old lady's chin, forcing the old lady to look directly at her. Under everyone's stare, she curled her lips and said strangely, "Who do you want to call the police? I know a lot of people in the army. Do you want me to introduce you?" The old lady was so frightened that she could only use screams to make up for her fear. She never thought that Yun Jian would know people in the army. Moreover, when the cold blade was pressed against her chin, the old lady felt her entire body tremble in fear. The others didn't dare to make a sound. Everyone present had already silently agreed that Yun Jian didn't admit or deny her identity. To them, this Yun Jian was quite dangerous. The old lady was so frightened that she rolled on the ground. In addition to using words to provoke her, Yun Jian also hypnotized the old lady to make her even more emotional. Seeing that the old lady couldn't stop trembling crazily, Yun Jian stood up from her half-squatting position. Her lips curled into a red arc as if nothing had happened. She pursed her lips and smiled at everyone as if nothing had happened. "It seems that my dear grandma is too excited because my dad and mom are about to remarry today. Everyone, tomorrow at Meng Meng Hotel in Suzhou City, there will be a small gathering for my dad and mom's remarriage ceremony. You are welcome." Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation 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 Translation. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.